Crystal chandeliers threw fractured light across marble floors, and the air smelled of expensive perfume, champagne, and ambition. London's elite moved through the space like pieces on a chessboard, calculated, controlled, every step rehearsed. Laughter rang hollow, smiles were currency. And beneath the silken jewels, everyone was bargaining. Elena Whitford stood near the tall windows overlooking the frost-kissed gardens. Her gloved hands clasped so tightly her knuckles ached. She wore a gown the color of winter sky, pale blue with silver embroidery that caught the light every time she breathed. It was beautiful, suffocating, exactly what her mother had chosen. "Stand straighter, Elena," her mother had hissed earlier, tugging at the corset laces until Elena could barely draw breath. "You must look perfect tonight. Lord Ashford will be watching." Lord Ashford, her future husband. A man twice her age, with kind eyes and absolutely no fire in his soul. Elena's stomach twisted. She glanced across the room and found him, standing among a cluster of older gentlemen, nodding politely at some dull story about trade routes. He was respectable, safe, predictable. Everything a woman of her station should want, and she felt nothing. "Miss Whitford, you look radiant tonight," Catherine cooed. "The engagement will be announced soon, won't it? How thrilling!" "Thrilling," Elena echoed flatly. Catherine's smile faltered. "You must be so happy." Elena forced her lips into the shape of agreement. "Of course." But the word tasted like ash. She turned back toward the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. Beyond her pale face, the winter gardens stretched dark and wild, untouched by the perfumed warmth inside. For a moment she imagined walking out into that cold, just walking and never stopping. "Careful, Miss Whitford. People might think you're bored." The voice came from behind her, low, rough-edged, and utterly unfamiliar. Elena stiffened. She turned slowly and froze. The man standing before her didn't belong here. He was tall, taller than anyone else in the room, with broad shoulders that strained against a perfectly tailored black coat. His hair was dark, almost black, and slightly too long, brushing the edge of his collar in a way that suggested he didn't care what anyone thought. His jaw was sharp, shadowed with stubble that no gentleman would dare wear to a ball. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. Gray, storm gray, and looking at her like he could see straight through the silk and satin, past the polite mask, down to the restless, raging thing she kept locked inside. Elena's voice caught. She straightened her spine. "I beg your pardon?" His mouth curved, not quite a smile. "You were staring out that window like you wanted to climb through it." Heat rushed to her cheeks. "That's absurd." "Is it?" He stepped closer, and Elena caught the faint scent of wood smoke and something wilder, leather, maybe, or the open air. Everything about him felt wrong for this place. Too real, too sharp. "Who are you?" she demanded, though her voice came out softer than she intended. "Darian Wolfe." He said it like the name should mean something. Duke of Greymoor. Elena blinked. She'd heard that name before, whispered in scandalized tones by the older women. The war hero. The Duke who'd vanished to his northern estates and refused to play society's games. "You're—" She stopped herself. "You don't come to London." "Not usually." His gaze didn't waver. "But my solicitor insisted I make an appearance, something about maintaining political alliances." He tilted his head slightly. "I didn't expect to find anything interesting." "And have you?" "Yes." The word hung between them like a spark near dry kindling. Elena's pulse kicked faster. She should step back, smile politely, make some excuse, and return to Lord Ashford's side like a proper young lady. Instead, she met Darian Wolfe's eyes and felt something inside her chest crack open. "You shouldn't say such things," she whispered. "Why not?" "Because I'm engaged." "Are you?" "The announcement will be made next week." "That's not what I asked." Elena's breath hitched. "I don't understand." "You're not engaged yet," Darian said quietly. "You're trapped. There's a difference." The words hit her like cold water. "You know nothing about me," Elena said, but her voice shook. "I know you're standing here pretending to breathe while that corset crushes your ribs. I know you've smiled at a dozen people tonight and meant none of it. I know." He paused, his gaze dropping briefly to her hands, still clenched tight. I know you want to run. Elena stared at him, her heart hammered against her stays. That's, she swallowed. That's an outrageous thing to say to a stranger. Is it a lie? Miss Whitford! Elena flinched. She turned to see her mother sweeping toward them, her expression frozen in a mask of polite alarm. There you are, darling. Lady Whitford's sharp eyes flicked to Darian, assessing him in an instant. Her smile tightened. Your Grace, how unexpected to see you in London. Darian inclined his head, his expression unreadable. Lady Whitford. I trust you've been introduced to my daughter. We were just speaking. How lovely. Her mother's hand closed around Elena's elbow, gentle on the surface, iron underneath. But I'm afraid I must steal her away. Lord Ashford has been asking for her. Elena's stomach dropped. Of course, Darian said smoothly, but his eyes stayed on Elena. It was a pleasure, Miss Whitford. She nodded mutely. Her mother steered her away, leaning close as they moved through the crowd. What were you thinking, speaking with him alone? He approached me. He's dangerous, Elena. A recluse. A man who turned his back on society. Her grip tightened. You will not speak to him again, do you understand? Elena said nothing. They reached Lord Ashford, who turned with a warm, harmless smile. Ah, Miss Whitford, I was hoping you might join us. Lord Pemberton was just telling the most fascinating story about... Elena didn't hear the rest. Her gaze drifted across the ballroom, searching, and found him. Darian Wolfe stood near the edge of the room, a glass of whiskey in his hand, watching her with those storm-gray eyes. He didn't look away. Neither did she. And in that moment, Elena felt the first crack in the cage she'd been living in her entire life. The next morning, Elena woke to pale winter light filtering through heavy drapes. Her room was beautiful. Cream walls, oil paintings, a canopy bed draped in silk, a gilded prison. She sat up slowly, her ribs still aching from the corset she'd worn the night before. A soft knock sounded at the door. Come in, Elena called. Her lady's maid Anne entered with a breakfast tray. Good morning, miss. Your mother asked me to remind you that the modiste will be arriving at noon. For what? Your wedding gown, miss. Elena's chest tightened. Of course. Anne set the tray down, her expression carefully neutral. She'd been with Elena since childhood, knew her moods, her silences, the things she didn't say aloud. Anne? Yes, miss? Elena hesitated. Have you ever wanted something you weren't allowed to have? Anne's hand stilled on the silver coffee pot. She looked up, her gaze soft. Every day of my life, miss. And what did you do? Anne smiled sadly. I learned to want smaller things. Elena's throat closed. After Anne left, she sat by the window, staring out at the gray London streets below. Carriages rolled past. People moved with purpose, their lives unfolding in directions they'd chosen, or at least pretended to. She thought of Darian Wolfe. Oh, you want to run. Her hands curled into fists. 3 days later, Elena attended another ball. She told herself she wasn't looking for him. She was lying. The evening dragged. Endless conversations about nothing, Lord Ashford's polite attention, her mother's watchful eyes. Elena moved through it all like a ghost, smiling on cue, saying the right words. And then, near midnight, she slipped away. The terrace was empty, the winter air biting against her bare shoulders. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, breathing in the cold like it could wake her up. Running away? She spun. Darian Wolfe stood in the doorway, framed by golden light from the ballroom. He looked different tonight, still dangerous, but somehow more contained, like he'd forced himself into the role of gentleman and was barely holding it together. I needed air, Elena said. So did I. He stepped onto the terrace, closing the door behind him. These things are unbearable. Then why come? I could ask you the same question. Elena looked away. I don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. Not women. No, Darian said quietly. I suppose not. Silence stretched between them. Elena could hear music drifting through the glass, a waltz, soft and mocking. Why are you really here? She asked. In London? Talking to me. Darian studied her for a long moment. Then he stepped closer, and Elena's breath caught. Because, he said, his voice low, when I looked at you 3 nights ago, I saw someone who's been told her whole life to be small, quiet, obedient, and I saw her hating every second of it. Elena's pulse hammered. You don't know me. I know you're stronger than they've let you believe. That's not, I know you're afraid. His gaze held hers. And I know you shouldn't be. Elena's chest ached. Why do you care? Because I spent 10 years on a battlefield watching men die for causes they didn't believe in, Darian said. And when I came home, I swore I'd never live a lie again. He paused. You're living one right now. Tears burned behind Elena's eyes. I don't have a choice. You do. You don't understand. My family, my reputation, everything I've been raised for is a cage, Darian interrupted, and you know it. Elena turned away, gripping the terrace railing so hard her hands shook. Even if you're right, what am I supposed to do? Refuse the marriage? Ruin myself? Destroy my family's name? Yes. She whirled on him. That's easy for you to say. You're a man, a duke. You can do whatever you want. I can, Darian agreed. And so can you. I'd lose everything. You'd lose nothing that matters. How can you possibly know that? Because I've already lost everything, Darian said, his voice rough. My men, my purpose, the belief that any of it meant something. He stepped closer, and Elena's breath stopped. And when I stood in the ruins of all that, I realized the only thing that mattered was whether I could look at myself and not feel like a coward. Elena stared at him, her heart breaking open. I can't, she whispered. Can't what? Be that brave. Darian's expression softened. You already are. You're just pretending you're not. Before Elena could answer, the terrace door opened. Miss Whitford. Her mother stood in the doorway, fury masked by a brittle smile. There you are. Lord Ashford has been asking for you. Elena's stomach dropped. Darian stepped back, his face unreadable. Your Grace, Lady Whitford said coldly, if you'll excuse us. Of course. Darian's gaze found Elena's one last time. Miss Whitford. He walked past her mother into the ballroom. Elena stood frozen. Inside, now! Her mother's voice was ice. Elena followed, her legs numb. What? The carriage ride home was silent. Her mother sat across from her, hands folded, face carved from stone. Her father stared out the window, jaw tight. Finally, her mother spoke. You will not speak to the Duke of Greymore again. Mother, you will not look at him. You will not acknowledge him. Is that clear? Elena's hands clenched in her lap. I didn't. You were alone with him on the terrace, her mother snapped. Do you have any idea what people will say if they find out? We were only talking. It doesn't matter. Her mother leaned forward, eyes blazing. Your engagement to Lord Ashford is the most important thing this family has accomplished in years. Do you understand that? Your marriage will secure our position, our future. What about my future? Elena's voice cracked. Her mother's expression hardened. Your future is Lord Ashford, and you will do your duty. Elena felt something inside her snap. And if I don't? The silence that followed was deafening. Her father turned slowly, his gaze cold. Then you will bring shame on this family. You will lose your home, your name, everything we've given you. His voice dropped. And you will regret it for the rest of your life. Elena's throat closed. She looked at her parents, these people who'd raised her, fed her, clothed her, and never once asked what she wanted. I see, she whispered. Her mother relaxed slightly. Good. Then we understand each other. Elena nodded, but inside something had shifted. A door she'd kept locked her entire life had cracked open, and she couldn't close it again. The days blurred together, dress fittings, guest lists, endless discussions about flowers and seating arrangements and which orchestra to hire. Elena moved through it all like a sleepwalker, nodding when expected, smiling on cue. Lord Ashford visited 3 times. He was kind, gentle. He spoke about their future home, the children they'd have, the life they'd build together. Elena felt nothing, At night, she lay awake and thought of storm-gray eyes and a voice that said, "You're stronger than they've let you believe." She thought of the terrace, the cold air, the way Darien Wolfe had looked at her like she was something wild and worth saving, and she thought of the cage tightening around her with every passing day. 2 weeks before the wedding, Elena received a letter. It arrived with the Morning Post, sealed with unfamiliar wax. She opened it in her room, hands shaking. The handwriting was sharp, angular. "Miss Whitford, I'm leaving London tomorrow. Before I go, I need you to know something. You have a choice. You've always had one. They've spent your whole life convincing you otherwise, but it's a lie. You can walk away. You can choose yourself. I know what that costs. I know what you'll lose. But I also know what you'll lose if you don't. If you want proof that another life is possible, meet me at Hyde Park, near the Serpentine, tomorrow at dawn. If you don't come, I'll understand. But I hope you do. D.W." Elena read the letter 3 times. Her heart hammered. She thought of Lord Ashford, her parents, the wedding 2 weeks away. She thought of the life she was supposed to want. And then she thought of the look in Darien Wolfe's eyes when he'd said, "You're living a lie." Elena folded the letter carefully and made a decision. Dawn came cold and gray. Elena dressed in the dark, her hands trembling as she laced her boots. She pulled on a heavy cloak and slipped out of the house while the servants still slept. The streets were quiet. Frost clung to the cobblestones. Her breath misted in the air. She walked quickly, heart pounding. Hyde Park stretched empty and silver in the early light. The Serpentine gleamed like polished metal, and near the water's edge, a figure waited. Darien Wolfe stood with his hands in his coat pockets, his breath misting in the cold. When he saw her, something shifted in his expression, relief, maybe, or hope. Elena stopped a few feet away. "You came," he said quietly. "I shouldn't have." "But you did." She looked at him, this dangerous, impossible man who'd walked into her life and cracked it open. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care what happens to me?" Darien stepped closer. "Because I know what it's like to live a life that isn't yours. And I know what it costs." He paused. "I don't want that for you." "You don't even know me." "I know enough." "What if I'm not who you think I am?" Elena's voice broke. "What if I'm not brave enough? Then I'm wrong." Darien's gaze held hers. "But I don't think I am." Elena's chest ached. "If I walk away from this wedding," she said slowly, "I'll lose everything. My family will disown me. Society will destroy me. I'll have nothing. You'll have yourself. Is that enough?" Darien smiled, sad and certain. "It's the only thing that is." Elena closed her eyes. She thought of Lord Ashford's kind smile and empty eyes. She thought of her mother's iron grip and her father's cold disappointment. She thought of the wedding dress hanging in her room like a shroud. And she thought of the wild thing inside her chest that had been screaming for years. When she opened her eyes, Darien was still watching her. "What happens if I choose this?" she whispered. "I don't know," he admitted. "But we'll figure it out together." Elena's hands shook, and then slowly she reached out. Darien took her hand. His palm was warm, rough, real. "I don't know how to do this," Elena said. "Neither do I. I'm terrified." "Good," Darien said gently. "That means it matters." Elena looked at their joined hands and felt the cage door swing open. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay? I'll do it." Her voice grew stronger. "I'll walk away." Darien's grip tightened. "You're sure?" Elena met his eyes, those storm-gray eyes that had seen through her from the very first moment. "No," she said honestly. "But I'm doing it anyway." And for the first time in her life, Elena Whitford chose herself. The world would burn for it. But she didn't care anymore. The decision was made at dawn. The consequences arrived by noon. Elena returned to the Whitford estate with her heart still racing and Darien's words echoing in her mind. "You'll have yourself." She slipped through the servants' entrance, her cloak damp with morning mist, and made it to her room without being seen. Or so she thought. "Where have you been?" Elena froze, her hand on the doorknob. Her mother stood at the end of the hallway, still in her dressing gown, her face carved from ice. "I went for a walk," Elena said, forcing her voice steady. "A walk." Lady Whitford moved closer, her eyes narrowing. "Before sunrise, alone, without telling anyone. I couldn't sleep." "Don't lie to me, Elena." Her mother's voice dropped to a whisper sharp as broken glass. "You were with him, weren't you?" Elena's stomach dropped. "I don't know what you... The Duke of Greymore." Her mother's hands trembled with fury. "One of the maids saw you leaving. I sent your father's man to follow you." The blood drained from Elena's face. "Nothing happened," she said quickly. "We only talked." "You met a man in secret at dawn." Her mother's voice rose. "Do you have any idea what this means? If word gets out, you'll be ruined. Lord Ashford will withdraw his proposal. We'll be destroyed." "Maybe that's what I want." The words burst out before Elena could stop them. Silence crashed between them. Her mother stared at her, eyes wide with shock. Then her expression hardened into something terrible. "Go to your room," she said quietly. "Your father will deal with you when he returns." "Mother, now." Elena fled. She locked herself in her room, heart hammering against her ribs. Through the door, she could hear her mother's footsteps retreating, sharp and angry on the marble floors. Elena sank onto her bed, hands shaking. What had she done? For one wild moment in the park, choosing herself had felt like freedom. Now, trapped in this room with her mother's fury echoing through the house, it felt like the beginning of war. Hours crawled past. Elena heard carriages arriving, voices in the hall, urgent, angry, her father's deep baritone, her mother's clipped responses. More footsteps, doors slamming, then silence. When the knock finally came, it was soft. "Miss Elena?" Anne's voice. "Your father wants to see you in his study." Elena stood slowly, smoothing her dress with trembling hands. The walk to her father's study felt like walking to the gallows. He sat behind his massive oak desk, hands folded, face expressionless. Her mother stood by the window, arms crossed, radiating cold fury. "Sit down, Elena," her father said. She sat. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then her father leaned back, studying her like she was a ledger that didn't balance. "Lord Ashford has been informed of this morning's indiscretion," he said finally. "I've assured him it was a misunderstanding, a moment of pre-wedding nerves, nothing more." Elena's throat tightened. "And he believed you?" "He's willing to overlook it." Her father's gaze hardened. "On one condition." "What condition?" "The wedding happens this week instead of 2 weeks from now. He wants you married before any more rumors can spread." Elena's chest constricted. "This week? 3 days," her mother cut in. "The arrangements are already being made." "3 days?" Elena's voice cracked. "That's impossible." "It's happening," her father said flatly. "You've forced our hand, Elena. We cannot risk further scandal." Elena stared at them, these people who'd raised her and now looked at her like a problem to be solved. "What if I refuse?" she whispered. The temperature in the room dropped. Her father stood slowly, his shadow falling across the desk like a blade. "Then you will leave this house with nothing," he said, each word precise and cold. "No money, no reputation, no family. You will be cut off completely, disowned, disinherited, and socially destroyed. No one in London will receive you. No respectable household will employ you. You will have nothing and no one." Elena's hands clenched in her lap. "So my choices are marry Lord Ashford in 3 days or be thrown into the streets." "Those are your choices," her mother said coldly. "And you have until tomorrow morning to decide." "That's not a choice. It's the only one you're getting." Her father sat back down, dismissing her with a glance. "You may go." Elena stood on shaking legs. She walked to the door, then stopped, hand on the frame. "What if there's a third option?" she said quietly. Her mother's eyes narrowed. "There isn't." "What if I choose myself?" "Then you're a fool," her father said, "and you'll regret it for the rest of your life." Elena looked back at them one last time. "Maybe," she whispered, "but at least it will be my life." She walked out and closed the door behind her. That night, Elena didn't sleep. She sat by the window, staring out at the dark London streets, her mind racing. 3 days. In 3 days, she would either walk down an aisle toward a man she didn't love, or she would walk out that door and into a world that would tear her apart. Both options felt like dying, but one of them felt like drowning slowly. She thought of Darian's words. "You'll have yourself." Was that enough? Could she really walk away from everything, her family, her home, the only life she'd ever known, for the chance to be free? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," Elena called. Anne entered, carrying a small bundle wrapped in cloth. She closed the door quietly behind her. "I thought you might need this, miss," she said, setting the bundle on the bed. Elena unwrapped it. Inside was a simple wool dress, a warm cloak, sturdy boots, and a small leather pouch. "Anne, there's money in the pouch," Anne said quietly. "Not much, but enough for a few weeks if you're careful." Elena's throat closed. "Why are you helping me?" Anne's eyes were sad and knowing. "Because I've watched you fade a little more every day since that engagement was announced. And because—" She paused. "Because every woman deserves one chance to choose her own life, even if the world punishes her for it." Tears burned behind Elena's eyes. "If my parents find out you helped me, they won't." Anne squeezed her hand. "But you need to decide soon, miss. Whatever you're going to do it before they move up the wedding." Elena nodded, unable to speak. Anne left as quietly as she'd come. Elena looked at the bundle on her bed, evidence of an escape route, a lifeline thrown into dark water. All she had to do was reach for it. The next morning, Elena woke before dawn. Her decision crystallized in the cold pre-morning darkness, sharp and clear as broken glass. She couldn't do it. She couldn't marry Lord Ashford, couldn't stand at an altar and promise her life to a man she felt nothing for, couldn't spend 50 years pretending to be content while something inside her screamed, even if it meant losing everything, even if it meant war. Elena dressed quickly in the simple clothes Anne had brought her. She packed a small bag, just essentials, things she could carry. Her hands trembled as she worked, but her resolve didn't waver. She was nearly ready when another knock sounded. Elena's heart stopped. "Miss Whitford?" A man's voice, unfamiliar. "I have a message for you." Elena opened the door a crack. A young man in servant's livery stood in the hallway, holding a sealed letter. "From the Duke of Greymore, miss," he said quietly. "I was told to deliver it personally and wait for a response." Elena took the letter with shaking hands. The servant stepped back, giving her privacy. She broke the seal. "Elena, by now they've told you the wedding is being moved up. I heard the news this morning. Word travels fast among the servants. I need you to know something. I meant what I said yesterday. If you choose to walk away, you won't be alone. I'm leaving London at noon today, returning to Greymore. If you want to come with me, meet me at the North Road coaching inn before the clock strikes 12. I'm not asking you to marry me. I'm not asking for promises. I'm offering you a place to go where they can't reach you. A chance to figure out who you are when no one's watching. But you need to understand what this means. If you do this, there's no going back. Your family will disown you. Society will crucify you. Your name will be dragged through every drawing room in London. I can protect you from most of it, but not all. So I need you to be sure. If you come, come, because you want freedom more than you want safety. Come because you're willing to fight for yourself. If you don't, if you choose to stay and marry Ashford, I'll understand. Some cages are easier to live in than others, but if you choose to run, I'll be waiting. Until noon. Darian." Elena read the letter 3 times, her heart pounding harder with each word. She looked up at the servant. "Tell him yes." The young man nodded and disappeared. Elena closed the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. It was real now. She was doing this. Elena left the Whitford estate at 10:30. She slipped out through the kitchen entrance while the household was distracted with breakfast preparations. The cook saw her but said nothing, just pressed a cloth-wrapped bundle of food into her hands and squeezed her shoulder. Elena walked quickly through the London streets, her small bag clutched tight, her heart hammering with every step. The coaching inn appeared through the morning fog like a promise. A squat stone building with horses stamping in the yard and travelers coming and going. Darian stood near a black carriage speaking with the driver. When he saw her, he went still. Elena crossed the yard slowly, every step feeling like walking off the edge of the world. "You came," Darian said quietly. "I did." "Are you sure?" Elena looked back toward the city, toward the life she was leaving behind. The family that would disown her, the future that would never happen. "No," she admitted, "but I'm here anyway." Darian's expression softened. "That's the bravest thing I've ever heard." He helped her into the carriage. The driver loaded her bag, and within minutes they were moving, wheels clattering over cobblestones, London falling away behind them. Elena stared out the window, watching the city dissolve into countryside. "What happens now?" she asked. "We go north," Darian said, "to Greymoor. It's remote, weeks from London, rough country. The estate is not what you're used to." "I don't care." "You say that now." He met her gaze. "But Elena, you need to understand. Life there is hard. The winters are brutal. The people are suspicious of outsiders. You'll be going from one of London's finest houses to a drafty castle in the middle of nowhere." "It sounds perfect," Elena said softly. Darian smiled, a real smile this time, surprised and genuine. "You're extraordinary." "I'm terrified." "That too." They rode in silence for a while, the carriage rocking gently. Then Elena asked the question that had been burning in her chest since the park. "Why are you doing this?" Darian looked at her. "I told you." "No, I mean really. Why risk everything for someone you barely know?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I spent 10 years watching men die for causes that didn't matter," he said finally. "And when I came home, I realized the worst death isn't dying on a battlefield. It's dying slowly inside a life you never wanted." He paused. "When I looked at you at that first ball, I saw someone dying that way. And I couldn't—" His voice roughened. "I couldn't watch it happen." Elena's chest ached. "You don't even know if I'm worth saving." "You're here, aren't you?" Darian's gaze held hers. "That means you already saved yourself. I'm just offering you somewhere to land." Tears blurred Elena's vision. For the first time in her life, someone saw her, not as a daughter to be married off or a reputation to be managed, but as a person worth fighting for. "Thank you," she whispered. Darian reached across the carriage and took her hand. "Don't thank me yet," he said gently. "The hard part's just beginning." They stopped at a coaching inn just past nightfall. The innkeeper's wife showed Elena to a small room with a narrow bed and a washstand. It was clean but sparse, nothing like the luxury she'd grown up with. Elena didn't care. She lay down fully clothed and fell into the first real sleep she'd had in weeks. But the peace didn't last. The next morning, as they prepared to leave, a rider arrived. Elena saw him from the window, a man in Whitford livery, dust-covered and grim-faced. He dismounted and strode into the inn. Her blood ran cold. "Darian!" she called. He appeared in her doorway instantly, reading her expression. "What is it?" "My father's man. He's here." Darian's jaw tightened. "Stay here." "No. Elena." He caught her hands. "Let me handle this." She wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. He left, closing the door behind him. Elena pressed her ear to the wood, straining to hear. Voices drifted up from the main room, Darian's low rumble and another man's sharp, officious tone. "The Duke of Greymoor?" "I am." "I come on behalf of Lord Whitford. He demands the immediate return of his daughter." "Miss Whitford is here of her own free will." "She's a young woman who's made a foolish mistake under your influence," the man shot back. "Lord Whitford will overlook this incident if she returns immediately. If not what?" Darian's voice went dangerously quiet. "Lord Whitford will pursue legal action, kidnapping, ruin of reputation. He'll destroy you, Your Grace, and her along with you." Silence. Then Darian spoke, each word sharp as a blade. "Go back to London and tell Lord Whitford this. His daughter is not his property. She's a grown woman who chose to leave. If he wants to destroy her reputation out of spite, that's his choice. But he won't touch her. And if he tries, he'll answer to me. You're making a terrible mistake. I've made plenty of those. This isn't one of them." Darian's voice hardened. "Now get out of my sight before I forget I'm a gentleman." Footsteps. A door slamming. Elena sagged against the wall, her heart racing. A moment later, Darian knocked softly. "It's me." She opened the door. He looked tired, angry, and somehow more real than any man she'd ever known. "He's gone," Darian said. "But Elena, you need to understand, this is just the beginning. Your father won't stop. He'll use every weapon he has. I know. He'll spread rumors, destroy your name, make sure no one in London will ever speak to you again." "I know." Darian searched her face. "Are you sure you want this?" Elena thought of her father's cold eyes, her mother's iron grip, the wedding dress hanging like a noose. "I'm sure," she said. "Then we leave now, before he sends more men." They were back in the carriage within the hour, racing north. The landscape changed as they traveled. Rolling hills gave way to rougher country. Wild moors, dark forests, craggy hills that looked like the bones of the earth pushing through skin. The roads grew worse. The villages grew smaller and farther apart. Elena watched it all with hungry eyes. It was nothing like London, nothing like the manicured gardens and polished marble of her old life. It was real, raw, free. "Tell me about Greymoor," she said one evening as they stopped for the night. Darian stared into the fire, his expression distant. "It's wild," he said finally. "The castle sits on a cliff overlooking the sea. The wind never stops. The winters are brutal, snow for months, roads impassable. The village nearby is small, maybe 200 people. They're good folk, but hard. They don't trust outsiders easily." "Will they trust me?" "No." He looked at her. "Not at first. You'll be the woman who ran away from London with their reclusive duke. They'll watch you, judge you, wait for you to fail. And if I don't fail?" A ghost of a smile crossed Darian's face. "Then they might grudgingly accept you, eventually." "How long is eventually?" "Years, maybe." Elena laughed, a real laugh, startled and genuine. "You're not making this sound very appealing." "I'm being honest." Darian's gaze held hers. "I won't lie to you, Elena, not about this. Greymoor is harsh, isolated, beautiful in its own way, but unforgiving. If you're expecting comfort or ease—" "I'm not," Elena interrupted. "I'm expecting to finally be able to breathe." Something shifted in Darian's expression, surprise maybe, or recognition. "Then you might actually survive it," he said softly. They reached Greymoor on a grey afternoon 10 days after leaving London. The castle rose from the cliffs like something out of a dark fairy tale, all stone towers and narrow windows, waves crashing against the rocks far below. The wind howled around it, salt sharp and wild. Elena stepped out of the carriage and stared up at it. "It's magnificent," she breathed. Darian looked at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. "Most people say it's forbidding." "It is," Elena smiled. "But it's also free." The castle staff came out to greet them. A small household, maybe a dozen people, all watching Elena with varying degrees of suspicion and curiosity. Mrs. Brennan, the housekeeper, was a stern woman with iron-gray hair and sharp eyes. She looked Elena up and down like she was assessing livestock. "So, you're the London girl," she said bluntly. "I suppose I am." "Can you work?" Elena blinked. What?" "Work," Mrs. Brennan repeated. "Cook, clean, mend. Can you do anything useful, or are you just another ornament?" Heat rushed to Elena's face. "I can learn." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have," Elena said, lifting her chin. "I'm not here to be ornamental. I'm here to live. If that means learning to work, I'll learn." Mrs. Brennan studied her for a long moment. Then, grudgingly, she nodded. "We'll see." She turned and walked back into the castle, barking orders at the other servants. Darian moved to Elena's side. "That went better than I expected. She hates me." "She's suspicious of you. There's a difference." He smiled slightly. "Give her time." Over the following days, Elena discovered what time meant. Life at Greymoor was nothing like London. She woke before dawn because everyone did. The castle was cold, drafty, and vast, with fires that never quite warmed the stone walls. Breakfast was porridge and hard bread, eaten quickly in the kitchen before the day's work began. And there was always work. Mrs. Brennan put her to task immediately, mending torn linen, scrubbing floors, helping in the kitchen. Elena's soft hands blistered, her back ached. She burned herself on hot pots and cut her fingers learning to chop vegetables. The other servants watched her with barely concealed amusement. "How long do you think the London lady will last?" she heard one maid whisper. "A week, maybe 2, another answered. "Then she'll run back crying." Elena gritted her teeth and kept working. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of being right. Darian disappeared for hours each day, managing the estate, meeting with tenants, overseeing repairs, writing the property. When he returned in the evenings, he looked tired and distant, like he was carrying weight Elena couldn't see. They ate dinner together in a small dining room, just the two of them. "How was your day?" he asked one evening. "I learned how to pluck a chicken," Elena said flatly. Darian's lips twitched. "And?" "It's disgusting." "It is." "Mrs. Brennan says I'm too slow." "You'll get faster." Elena set down her fork. "Do you think I can do this?" Darian looked at her, really looked. "You're still here, aren't you?" "Barely." "That's more than most people would manage." His voice softened. "You're stronger than you think, Elena." "I don't feel strong. I feel lost." "Good," Darian said. "That means you're finding yourself." 3 weeks after arriving at Greymore, Elena received a letter. It came via messenger, sealed with her father's crest. Her hand shook as she opened it. "Elena, you are hereby formally disowned. Your name has been struck from the family records. You will inherit nothing. You are no longer welcome in this house or any property bearing the Whitford name. Furthermore, Lord Ashford has withdrawn his proposal and is pursuing legal action for breach of promise. The scandal you have caused has made it impossible for your sister to secure a decent match. The damage you have done to this family is irreparable. I hope your freedom was worth it. You are dead to us. Lord Whitford." Elena read the letter twice. Then she walked to the fireplace and dropped it into the flames. She watched the paper curl and blacken, her father's words turning to ash, and felt nothing. No grief, no regret. Just a strange, hollow sense of relief. She was free, completely, irrevocably free. That night, she found Darian in his study, staring at ledgers by candlelight. "It's done," she said quietly. He looked up. "What is?" "My father officially disowned me." She held out the burned remnants of the letter. "I'm no longer a Whitford." Darian stood slowly. "Elena." "I'm free," she interrupted, her voice stronger. "For the first time in my life, I belong to no one but myself." He searched her face. "How do you feel?" Elena considered the question. "Terrified," she admitted, "and alive." Darian crossed the room and took her hands. "Then we'll figure out the rest together," he said. And for the first time since arriving at Greymore, Elena felt like maybe, just maybe, she could survive this after all. The words hung between them like a promise. We'll figure out the rest together. And for one fragile moment, Elena believed it. Then winter came to Greymore, and everything changed. The first snow fell in early November, soft and deceptive. Within a week, the roads were impassable. The wind off the sea turned vicious, howling around the castle walls like something alive and hungry. Ice formed on the inside of windows. The fires burned day and night, but the cold seeped through stone and mortar anyway. Elena had thought herself prepared. She was wrong. "You need to wear more layers," Mrs. Brennan said one morning, eyeing Elena's shivering frame with something approaching pity. "London girls always think they know cold. You don't." "I'm fine," Elena insisted through chattering teeth. "You're stubborn." Mrs. Brennan shoved a thick wool shawl at her. "There's a difference." Elena took the shawl without argument. She was learning that survival at Greymore meant swallowing pride and accepting help, even when it came wrapped in criticism. The village proved harder to crack than the castle. Darian took her there on a clear morning, riding down the winding path from the cliffs to the cluster of stone cottages huddled against the wind. Smoke rose from chimneys, chickens scratched in frozen yards. People stopped their work to watch them pass, their faces wary and closed. "They're not used to strangers," Darian said quietly, "especially not ones who arrive in the dead of night fleeing scandal. Word travels that fast? Word travels faster than the wind up here." He dismounted and helped her down. "Just be yourself. They'll come around eventually." Elena wasn't so sure. She followed Darian into the village's general store, a cramped space that smelled of dried fish, candle wax, and old wood. The shopkeeper, a weathered man named Thomas, nodded at Darian, but his eyes slid past Elena like she didn't exist. Need supplies, Your Grace? Flour, salt, lamp oil, Darian said, and whatever dried meat you have. Thomas gathered the items in silence. Elena wandered toward a shelf of fabric bolts, running her fingers over rough wool. A woman stood nearby with two small children clinging to her skirts, all three watching Elena with identical suspicious stares. "Good morning," Elena said, offering a smile. The woman's expression didn't change. She gathered her children and moved to the other side of the shop. Heat rushed to Elena's face. Darian appeared at her elbow, his jaw tight. "Ignore them. They hate me. They don't know you. They don't want to know me." Elena's voice dropped. "I'm the scandal, the woman who ran from her wedding, the London lady who thinks she's too good for them. You don't think that, but they do." Darian paid for the supplies and they left in silence. On the ride back to the castle, Elena stared at the gray sea below, feeling smaller than she'd ever felt in her life. "Give them time," Darian said. "How much time?" "I don't know." He sounded tired. "But Elena, you need to understand something. These people, they've lived hard lives. They've lost children to fever, husbands to the sea, entire harvests to bad weather. They don't trust easily because trust is a luxury they can't afford. Then what do I do? Prove you're not what they think you are." He looked at her. "Prove you can survive." Bisset. The test came sooner than either of them expected. A week later, a rider arrived at dawn, pounding on the castle gates. Darian met him in the courtyard, his face going grim as he read the message. Elena watched from a window, her stomach knotting. When Darian came to find her, his expression was dark. "What is it?" she asked. "Your father's making good on his threats." He handed her a legal document. "Lord Ashford is suing for breach of promise. The case will be heard in London next month." Elena's hands shook as she read. The language was dense, formal, but the message was clear. Lord Ashford wanted compensation for the humiliation she'd caused, a staggering sum, enough to cripple even a duke's estate. "This is blackmail," she whispered. "It's revenge." Darian's voice was flat. "Your father wants to punish you. Ashford's just the weapon." "Can they win?" "Probably. You did break the engagement. Technically, that's breach of contract." Elena sank into a chair. "How much are they asking for?" £20,000. The number hit her like a fist. "That's enough to bankrupt Greymore," Darian finished. "Yes." Silence crashed between them. "I'll go back," Elena said suddenly. "I'll face them. Apologize. Whatever they want." "No." "Darian, I can't let you lose everything because of me. You're not losing yourself to save my estate." His voice was iron. "I won't allow it." "You don't have a choice. Neither do you." He crossed to her, his eyes fierce. "We fight this, together." "How?" "I don't know yet." His jaw tightened. "But I'll figure something out." He left before she could argue. Elena sat alone, staring at the legal document, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. She'd chosen freedom. Now freedom was going to cost everything. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She wandered the castle corridors, wrapped in layers of wool, trying to outrun her thoughts. The wind screamed outside. Somewhere below, the sea crashed against cliffs. She found herself in the library, a vast room lined with books that smelled of dust and old paper. A fire burned low in the grate. Darian sat in a leather chair, staring into the flames, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "Can't sleep?" he asked without looking up. Elena crossed to the fire, holding her hands toward the warmth. "I keep thinking about the lawsuit." "So do I." "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for all of this, for dragging you into my mess." "Stop." Darian set down his glass. "You didn't drag me anywhere. I chose this." "Why?" Elena turned to face him. "Why would you risk so much for someone you barely know?" For a long moment he didn't answer. Then he spoke, his voice rough. "I told you I spent 10 years on battlefields. What I didn't tell you was why I stayed so long." He stared into the fire. "I had a younger brother, Thomas. He was everything I wasn't, charming, easy, loved by everyone. He joined the army because I did, followed me into hell because he thought I knew what I was doing." Elena's chest tightened. He died in my arms during a skirmish that shouldn't have happened, Darian continued. We were ambushed. I made a bad call. And he paid for it. His hands clenched. I came home after that. Couldn't stomach it anymore, but the guilt? His voice cracked. It never leaves. Darian, when I saw you at that ball, he said, looking at her now, his eyes raw, I saw someone trapped the way Thomas was trapped, following orders, doing what everyone expected, dying slowly inside. And I thought, he stopped. I thought maybe if I could help you get free, it would mean something, would balance the scales somehow. Tears burned Elena's eyes. That's not how it works. I know. A bitter smile crossed his face, but I tried anyway. Elena crossed to him, kneeling beside his chair. She took his hands, rough, scarred, warm. You saved me, she said fiercely. Not your brother, me. And I'm here. I'm alive. I'm free because of you. And now I'm going to lose everything trying to protect you. Then we lose it together. Elena held his gaze. You told me we'd figure this out, so let's figure it out. Darian stared at her, something shifting in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or hope. You're not going to give up, are you? He said softly. No? Elena smiled through tears. I'm stubborn. Someone told me that once. He laughed, a real laugh, startled and genuine. Then he pulled her close, and Elena let herself be held, feeling his heartbeat steady against her ear. For the first time since the lawsuit arrived, she felt like maybe they could survive this. The answer came from an unexpected source. 2 weeks later, Mrs. Brennan knocked on Elena's door. There's someone here to see you, the housekeeper said, her expression unreadable. Who? The village midwife, Sarah Crawford. Elena's brow furrowed. Why would she want to see me? You'll have to ask her. Sarah Crawford was a sturdy woman in her 50s with capable hands and sharp, intelligent eyes. She sat in the drawing room, turning her worn hat in her lap. Miss Whitford, she said when Elena entered. Or, I suppose it's not Miss anymore, is it? Elena's stomach dropped. I'm not married. No, but you're not the woman you were either. Sarah's gaze was direct. That's why I'm here. Elena sat slowly. I don't understand. There's sickness in the village, Sarah said bluntly. Fever. Started with the Morrison children, spread to 6 families. I'm doing what I can, but I'm one woman and there's too many sick. She paused. I need help. I'm not a healer. You have hands, don't you? Can you follow instructions? Yes, but... Then that's enough. Sarah leaned forward. Look, I know what they say about you in the village. I know they think you're some pampered London lady who'll run at the first sign of hardship, but I also know you've been at Graymore for 2 months now, and you're still here. Her voice softened. That tells me something. Elena's throat tightened. What does it tell you? That maybe you're tougher than you look. Sarah stood. I need help, and you need the village to stop hating you. Seems to me we can help each other. It was a test. Elena knew it immediately. When do we start? She asked. Sarah's expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but close. Now. Bad. The fever was brutal. Elena spent the next 3 weeks moving between cottages, helping Sarah tend the sick. She learned to change sweat-soaked sheets, spoon broth into fevered mouths, hold down thrashing children while Sarah administered medicine. It was exhausting, terrifying work. The first time a child died, a little girl, maybe 5 years old, Elena ran outside and vomited in the snow. Sarah found her there, shaking and sobbing. It never gets easier, the midwife said quietly. But you can't let it stop you. The ones who survive need you. Elena wiped her mouth, her hands trembling. I don't know if I can do this. You can. Sarah gripped her shoulder. Because you have to. So Elena went back inside. She held the mother while she wept. She helped wrap the small body. She stayed until the father returned from the fields and collapsed in grief. Then she moved to the next cottage and started again. Slowly, impossibly, the fever began to break. Children who'd been burning with sickness opened their eyes and asked for water. Women who'd lain motionless for days sat up and took broth. Men who'd been delirious regained their senses. Not all of them survived, but enough did. And the village noticed. Thomas, the shopkeeper, nodded at Elena when she came in for supplies. The woman who'd pulled her children away now stopped to thank her. Slowly, grudgingly, the wall of suspicion began to crack. "You did well," Sarah said one evening as they walked back to the castle through the snow. "Better than I expected." Elena was too tired to smile. "Does this mean they don't hate me anymore?" "They don't hate you," Sarah corrected. "They're just deciding whether to trust you. That takes time." "How much time?" Sarah shrugged. "In the village? Maybe another year or two." Elena laughed, exhausted and a little hysterical. "That's encouraging. It's honest." Sarah stopped, studying her. "You're not what I expected either." "What did you expect?" "Someone who'd give up and go home the first time things got hard." The midwife's expression softened. "But you're still here. Still fighting. That counts for something." When Elena returned to the castle that night, Darian was waiting. "I heard what you did," he said. "Sarah needed help. The village is talking about you." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Apparently the London lady isn't completely useless after all. Elena managed a tired laugh. "High praise." "It is, actually." Darian's voice turned serious. "Elena, you may have just saved us." "What do you mean?" "If the village trusts you, if they see you as one of them instead of an outsider, they'll support us when the lawsuit comes to trial. Public opinion matters, even in court." His eyes gleamed. "You've given us a fighting chance." Hope flickered in Elena's chest. Maybe, just maybe, they could survive this after all. But the universe had other plans. The messenger arrived on a bitter January morning, his horse half dead from the ride. Darian read the letter in the courtyard, his face going ashen. "What is it?" Elena asked, dread pooling in her stomach. He handed her the paper without speaking. It was from London, from her father's solicitor. Lord Ashford had withdrawn the lawsuit. Elena's heart leaped, then crashed when she read the next line. Instead, her father had petitioned the courts to have her declared mentally unfit. He was seeking legal guardianship, claiming she'd been manipulated and coerced by Darian. If successful, he could force her back to London and have her committed to an asylum for treatment. The world tilted. "They can't—" Elena's voice broke. "They can't do this." "They can," Darian said, his voice hollow. "If the court believes you're not of sound mind, they can strip your rights entirely." "But I'm not insane. Your father will claim running away from your wedding, living unwed with a man, refusing to return home, all evidence of mental instability." Darian's hands clenched. "And the worst part is, some judges might believe him." Elena stared at the letter, feeling her hard-won freedom crumbling. "What do I do?" she whispered. Darian's jaw tightened. "We go to London. We fight this in court." "They'll destroy me. They'll try." He caught her hands. "But Elena, listen to me. You've survived winter at Greymore. You've earned the respect of a village that wanted nothing to do with you. You've faced death and loss and kept going." His voice turned fierce. "You can survive this too." Elena wanted to believe him, but fear clawed at her throat. If she lost this fight, she'd lose everything, her freedom, her choices, her very self. They'd lock her away, drug her into compliance, turn her into the obedient daughter they'd always wanted. The cage would close forever. "When do we leave?" she asked quietly. "Tomorrow. We need to move fast." That night, Elena packed her few belongings with shaking hands. Mrs. Brennan appeared in the doorway, her expression uncharacteristically soft. "I never thought you'd last a month here," the housekeeper said. "I was wrong." Elena's throat tightened. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Mrs. Brennan pressed something into her hands, a small cloth bundle. "For luck, you'll need it." And inside was a sprig of dried heather, wrapped in ribbon. "From the moors," Mrs. Brennan said. "For strength." Elena clutched it like a lifeline. They left Greymore at dawn. The village turned out to see them off. Not all of them, but enough. Sarah stood at the front, her face grave. "You fight hard," the midwife said. "You hear me? You fight like hell." Elena nodded, unable to speak. The journey to London took 12 brutal days. They traveled in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Elena stared out at the landscape rolling past, watching the wild moors give way to tamed fields, the rugged north soften into the civilized south. Every mile felt like moving toward a cage. London appeared through the fog like a judgment, massive, crushing, familiar, in all the worst ways. Darian had rented rooms in a quiet part of the city, far from Elena's father's reach. They arrived exhausted, travel-worn, and terrified. "The hearing is in 3 days," Darian said. We need a solicitor, a good one." "Who would take our case?" "I know someone, a man who doesn't care about scandal." Darian's jaw tightened. "But Elena, you need to prepare yourself. The hearing won't be easy. Your father's lawyers will try to make you look unstable. They'll twist everything, your decision to leave, your time at Graymore, your relationship with me." "What should I say?" "The truth." He met her eyes. "Tell them exactly who you are and what you want. Don't let them make you small." The hearing was held in a cold, wood-paneled room that smelled of old books and older power. Elena sat beside Darian and their solicitor, a sharp-eyed man named Harrison, who'd agreed to take the case for reasons Elena didn't fully understand. Across the room, her father sat with his own team of lawyers, his face carved from ice. Their eyes met. Lord Whitford's expression didn't change, but Elena saw the cold fury beneath. He would destroy her if he could. The magistrate entered, an elderly man with wire spectacles and a perpetual frown. "This court is convened to consider the petition of Lord Edmund Whitford regarding the mental competency of his daughter, Elena Whitford," he announced. "Lord Whitford, your opening statement." Her father's lawyer stood, a sleek, vicious-looking man named Carstairs. "Your Honor, we come before you today with grave concerns about Miss Whitford's mental state. 3 months ago, she abandoned her fiancé on the eve of their wedding, fled London in secret, and has been living in isolation with a man to whom she is not married. This behavior, reckless, irrational, and destructive, suggests a profound break with reality." Elena's hands clenched under the table. Carstairs continued, laying out their case with surgical precision. He painted Elena as a fragile, manipulated girl, too weak-minded to make her own decisions. He cited her sudden change in behavior, her refusal to communicate with her family, her inappropriate attachment to Darian. Every word was a knife. When Carstairs finished, Harrison stood. "Your Honor, Miss Whitford is not mentally incompetent. She is a grown woman who made a difficult choice to prioritize her own well-being over social expectations. That is not insanity. That is courage." The magistrate's expression didn't change. "We shall hear testimony. Lord Whitford, call your first witness." They called Lord Ashford. Elena's former fiancé took the stand, looking uncomfortable but determined. He described her as increasingly distant in the weeks before the wedding, troubled, unstable. "Did she ever express doubts about the marriage?" Carstairs asked. "Not directly," Ashford admitted, "but her behavior suggested deep anxiety. I believed—" He paused. "I believed she was suffering from some form of hysteria common to young women facing marriage." Elena bit her tongue so hard she tasted blood. They called her mother next. Lady Whitford sat in the witness chair, spine straight, face composed. She testified about Elena's erratic behavior, her inappropriate defiance, her concerning attachment to a man of questionable character. "Did she seem herself in the months before she disappeared?" Carstairs asked. "No," Lady Whitford said firmly. "She seemed lost, confused, not the daughter I raised." Harrison cross-examined gently. "Is it possible, Lady Whitford, that your daughter simply wanted a different life than the one you planned for her?" "A sane woman doesn't destroy her future out of childish rebellion," her mother replied coldly. When they called her father to the stand, Elena felt something inside her break. Lord Whitford testified with cold precision, describing Elena as a troubled girl who'd lost her way. He spoke of his concern for her well-being, his desire to protect her from herself. "I only want my daughter back," he said, and his voice almost sounded sincere. "Safe, cared for, receiving the treatment she needs." Treatment. The word hung in the air like a threat. Harrison stood. "Lord Whitford, is it true that you've disowned your daughter?" A pause. "Yes." "And yet now you seek legal control over her?" "To protect her." To control her, Harrison interrupted. To force her back into a life she explicitly rejected. She is not capable of making such decisions. Why? Because she disagreed with you? Lord Whitford's face darkened. Because she threw away everything for a man she barely knows. A duke, Harrison said mildly, a decorated war hero, a man of considerable standing, a recluse who preys on vulnerable women. The magistrate banged his gavel. That's enough. Mr. Harrison, do you have further questions? Just one. Harrison turned to Lord Whitford. If your daughter is so mentally unfit, why did you wait 3 months to seek guardianship? Why only now, after she's proven she can survive without you? Silence. Lord Whitford's jaw tightened. I was giving her time to come to her senses. Or, Harrison said quietly, you were hoping she'd fail. And when she didn't, when she thrived, in fact, you decided to destroy her another way. Objection! Carstairs shouted. The magistrate banged his gavel again. Sustained! Mr. Harrison, confine yourself to questions. But the damage was done. The magistrate turned to Elena. Miss Whitford, you may take the stand. Elena's legs trembled as she crossed to the witness chair. Every eye in the room fixed on her. Harrison approached gently. Miss Whitford, can you tell the court why you left London? Elena took a breath, finding her voice. Because I was suffocating, she said clearly. My entire life had been decided for me. Who I would marry, where I would live, what I would become. And when I tried to imagine that future, all I could see was myself disappearing piece by piece until there was nothing left. Did the Duke of Greymore force you to leave? No, he offered me a choice. I made it myself. And your time at Greymore? How would you describe it? The hardest thing I've ever done. Elena's voice strengthened. I learned to work, to survive, to be useful. I helped care for sick villagers during a fever outbreak. I earned their respect, not through my father's name or my social position, but through my own actions. Do you regret your decision? No. Elena looked directly at her father. Not for a second. Carstairs stood for cross-examination, his eyes cold. Miss Whitford, you claim you left of your own free will, yet you abandoned your family, your reputation, and your future. Does that sound like the action of a rational person? It sounds like the action of someone choosing herself over what others wanted for her, Elena replied. You've been living unwed with a man in separate quarters, Elena interrupted, chaperoned by a full household staff. Still inappropriate. Only by the standards of people who believe women are property, Elena said, her voice sharp. I am not insane for wanting to control my own life. Carstairs' expression hardened. You claim to have found yourself at Greymore, yet here you are, unable to support yourself, dependent on a man's charity. I support myself through work, Elena cut in. I've learned skills, earned wages. I'm not dependent. I'm building a life. A life as what? A servant? A mistress? Harrison shot to his feet. Objection! The witness's character is not on trial here. Her judgment is, Carstairs snapped, and her judgment led her to throw away a respectable future for, what, freedom? He spat the word like poison. That's not strength, Miss Whitford. That's delusion. Elena stood, her voice ringing through the courtroom. No. Delusion is believing that a woman can only have value as someone's daughter or wife. Delusion is thinking that comfort matters more than truth. Her hand shook, but her voice didn't waver. I would rather freeze in a northern castle and know I chose my life than live in luxury knowing every choice was made for me. Silence crashed through the room. Then the magistrate spoke. I'll render my decision tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Court adjourned. The gavel fell like a gunshot. Elena and Darian returned to their rooms in silence. She collapsed into a chair, shaking, the weight of the day crushing down. You were magnificent, Darian said quietly. I don't know if it was enough. It was everything you could give. Elena looked at him, this man who'd risked so much for her freedom. If I lose tomorrow, you won't. But if I do, her voice broke. If they take me, Darian crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. Then I'll fight for you, he said fiercely. Every day. Every way I can. I won't let them bury you. Elena clung to him, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know." He pulled back, meeting her eyes. "But Elena, no matter what happens tomorrow, you've already won." "How?" "Because you stood in that courtroom and told the truth. You didn't hide. You didn't apologize for wanting a life of your own." His voice roughened. "You were exactly who you are, and that's the bravest thing I've ever seen." Tears spilled down Elena's cheeks, and in that moment she realized something. Somewhere between Greymoor's frozen moors and this London courtroom, she'd stopped being the frightened girl who ran from a wedding. She'd become someone who fought, someone who survived, someone free. Whatever the magistrate decided tomorrow couldn't change that. They sat together through the night, waiting for dawn and judgment, two souls who'd chosen each other against a world that demanded obedience. And when morning came, Elena walked into that courtroom with her head high, ready to hear her fate. The magistrate entered precisely at 9. His face revealed nothing. "I've considered the evidence and testimony carefully," he began. "This case presents a fundamental question. Does a woman's choice to reject social conventions constitute evidence of mental incompetence?" Elena's heart hammered. "Lord Whitford argues yes, that his daughter's behavior demonstrates irrationality requiring intervention. Miss Whitford argues no, that her choices, while unconventional, were made freely and with full understanding of their consequences." The magistrate paused. "After careful consideration, I find—" The courtroom door crashed open. Everyone turned. A woman stood in the doorway, elegant and furious, her traveling cloak still dusted with road dirt. Elena's breath caught. It was her sister. Catherine Whitford strode into the courtroom, her eyes blazing. "Your Honor," she said, her voice ringing clear. "Before you rule, there's something this court needs to know." Catherine Whitford strode into the courtroom like a storm-given human form, her traveling cloak billowing behind her, mud still clinging to her boots. Her face, so like Elena's but harder, sharper, was set with fierce determination. Lord Whitford shot to his feet. "Catherine, what are you—" "Sit down, Father," Catherine said, her voice cold as winter iron. The magistrate banged his gavel. "Young woman, this is highly irregular. So is attempting to have a sane woman declared incompetent to satisfy wounded pride," Catherine shot back. She turned to the magistrate, her spine straight. "Your Honor, I am Catherine Whitford, eldest daughter of Lord Edmund Whitford. I have testimony relevant to this case." Carstairs moved to object, but the magistrate raised a hand. "This is most unusual," he said slowly, "but given the gravity of the matter, I'll allow it. Miss Catherine Whitford, approach the witness stand." Catherine crossed the room without looking at her father. Her eyes found Elena's for one brief moment, and something passed between them. Recognition, understanding, solidarity. Elena's throat tightened. Catherine took the stand, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Harrison approached carefully. "Miss Whitford, why have you come here today?" "Because I won't watch my father destroy my sister for having the courage I lacked," Catherine said bluntly. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Lord Whitford's face went crimson. "Catherine!" The magistrate's gavel cracked down. "Lord Whitford, you will remain silent, or I will have you removed." Catherine's gaze didn't waver. "My father claims Elena is mentally unfit because she refused to marry Lord Ashford. But the truth is Elena refused because Lord Ashford is a violent man who has no business near any woman." Shocked silence. Lord Ashford surged to his feet. "That's a lie." "Is it?" Catherine turned to him, her voice sharp as a blade. "Shall I tell the court about Lady Margaret Pemberton? The woman you courted 3 years ago who broke off the engagement after suffering a mysterious fall that left her with a broken wrist?" Ashford's face went pale. "Or perhaps," Catherine continued relentlessly, "we should discuss your late wife, the one who died from a riding accident after your servants reported hearing screaming from her chambers the night before?" "Those are vicious rumors," Ashford started. "Are they?" Catherine's voice rose. "Then why did your own housekeeper quit her position and refuse to work for you again? Why did 3 maids leave your employ within 6 months, all citing uncomfortable circumstances?" Harrison stepped forward. "Your Honor, I move to enter into evidence the sworn statements of these women, which Miss Catherine Whitford has brought with her today." He produced a folder thick with documents. Carstairs looked stricken. Your Honor, this is highly prejudicial. This is the truth, Catherine said. My sister refused to marry Lord Ashford because she learned what kind of man he was. When she tried to tell our parents, they dismissed her concerns as wedding nerves. They were so focused on the alliance, the money, the social advantage. They didn't care that they were handing their daughter to a monster. Lady Whitford stood, her face ashen. Catherine, that's enough. No, Mother, it's not. Catherine's voice cracked. You sacrificed Elena to save our family's reputation. And when she had the strength to save herself, you tried to have her locked away for it. She destroyed our family, Lord Whitford began. She saved herself. Catherine's voice rang through the courtroom. And I should have had the courage to do the same. Silence fell like snow. The magistrate leaned forward. Miss Whitford, are you saying you have personal knowledge of Lord Ashford's character? I am. Catherine's hands clenched. 2 years ago, he cornered me at a ball. When I refused his advances, Her voice faltered. He made it clear that rejection wasn't an option. I was saved only because someone entered the room. Elena's hands flew to her mouth. She'd never known. Catherine had never said a word. I told our parents, Catherine continued, her voice steadier now. They told me I'd misunderstood, that Lord Ashford was a gentleman, that I should be flattered by his attention. She looked at her father with something close to pity. So when Elena was engaged to him, I stayed silent. I convinced myself she'd be fine, that maybe I really had misunderstood. But you hadn't, Harrison said quietly. No. Catherine's voice was iron, and when Elena ran, I realized she was braver than I'd ever been. She chose herself over the family's expectations, over fear, over everything we'd been taught to value. She turned to the magistrate. My sister is not insane, Your Honor. She's the sanest person in our family. The courtroom erupted. Lord Whitford was shouting. Ashford was on his feet, face purple with rage. Lady Whitford sat frozen, her carefully constructed composure shattered. The magistrate's gavel cracked down repeatedly. Order! Order in this court! When the chaos finally subsided, the magistrate's expression was grim. Lord Ashford, he said coldly, I suggest you withdraw from these proceedings immediately. If even half of what Miss Catherine Whitford alleges is true, your presence here is an insult to justice. Ashford opened his mouth, then closed it. His lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. We withdraw, the lawyer said stiffly. Ashford stormed from the courtroom, and Elena felt a weight lift from her chest. The magistrate turned to Lord Whitford. My lord, I find it deeply troubling that you would seek to have your daughter declared incompetent when the evidence suggests she made an eminently rational decision to protect herself from harm. Those allegations are unproven, Lord Whitford started. They are sworn testimony, the magistrate interrupted, which I will investigate further. But for the purposes of this hearing, I have heard enough. He looked at Elena. Miss Whitford, please stand. Elena rose on trembling legs. Darian stood with her, his hand finding hers beneath the table. The magistrate's expression softened slightly. Miss Whitford, this court finds that you are of sound mind and fully capable of making your own decisions. Your father's petition for guardianship is denied. Relief crashed through Elena so powerfully her knees nearly buckled. Furthermore, the magistrate continued, I am issuing a restraining order preventing Lord Edmund Whitford from attempting to contact you or interfere with your life in any way. You are, in the eyes of this court, a free woman. The gavel fell. Final. Absolute. Elena swayed. Darian caught her, pulling her close. It's over, he whispered. You're free. Around them, the courtroom dissolved into chaos. Lord Whitford was arguing furiously with his lawyers. Lady Whitford sat pale and silent. Reporters who'd somehow gotten word of the hearing scrambled for the exits, already writing their stories. Elena barely noticed any of it. She found Catherine in the crowd, pushing through the press of bodies. Their eyes met. And then Elena was moving, crossing the space between them, wrapping her arms around her sister. Catherine held her tight, both of them shaking. I'm sorry, Catherine whispered. I should have spoken up sooner, should have protected you. You did, Elena said fiercely. You saved me today. I should have saved you 2 years ago. You're saving me now. That's what matters. They pulled back, looking at each other, two women who'd been raised in the same cage, only one of whom had found the courage to break free. "What will you do now?" Elena asked. Catherine's smile was bitter. "Face father's wrath, I suppose. He'll probably disown me too." "Then come with us." Catherine blinked. "What?" "Come to Greymore." Elena gripped her sister's hands. "You said you wished you'd had my courage. Here's your chance. Choose yourself, Catherine. Choose freedom." For a long moment, Catherine stared at her. Then she looked over Elena's shoulder, at their father, red-faced and furious, at their mother, cold and disappointed, at the life that had never quite fit. "All right," Catherine whispered. "I'll come." They left London the next morning before dawn. 3 of them this time, Elena, Darian, and Catherine, packed into the carriage like fugitives fleeing a burning city. Lord Whitford had sent a final message the night before, delivered by a grim-faced servant. Both daughters were disowned, their names struck from the family records, their inheritances forfeit. Catherine read the letter once, then fed it to the fire. "Good riddance," she said. The journey north was different this time. Elena watched familiar landscapes roll past, but now they felt like freedom instead of exile. The wild moors, the rugged hills, the gray sea in the distance. It all looked like home. Catherine was quiet for most of the journey, staring out the window with an expression Elena recognized. Terror mixed with exhilaration, grief tangled with hope. "What's it like?" Catherine asked one evening as they stopped at an inn. "Greymore?" "Cold," Elena said honestly. "Harsh, beautiful. Nothing like London." "Will they accept me?" "Eventually, if you work for it." Catherine smiled faintly. "I've never worked a day in my life." "Neither had I." Elena squeezed her hand. "You'll learn." Mad. They reached Greymore on a clear afternoon, the castle rising from the cliffs like a promise kept. The household staff came out to greet them, Mrs. Brennan in the lead. The housekeeper's eyes widened when she saw Catherine. "Another London lady?" she said dryly. "My sister," Elena said. "Catherine, this is Mrs. Brennan. She runs Greymore with an iron fist." Mrs. Brennan snorted. "Someone has to." She studied Catherine with the same assessing gaze she'd once turned on Elena. "Can you work?" "I can learn," Catherine said, lifting her chin. "That's what your sister said." "And I was right," Elena interjected. Mrs. Brennan's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "We'll see. Come inside before you freeze." The next weeks blurred together in a flurry of adjustment. Catherine learned quickly that Greymore demanded everything and gave nothing freely. She burned herself on hot stoves, blistered her hands scrubbing floors, and went to bed exhausted every night. But slowly, impossibly, she adapted. Elena watched her sister transform, the carefully cultivated London manners falling away, replaced by something rawer and more real. Catherine's hands grew rough. Her posture relaxed. The constant tension that had lived in her shoulders began to ease. One morning, 3 weeks after their arrival, Sarah Crawford appeared at the castle gates. "There's fever in the village again," she said bluntly. "Not as bad as last time, but I need help." Elena turned to Catherine. "Want to come?" Her sister hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." They worked side by side for 2 weeks, moving between cottages, tending the sick. Catherine proved surprisingly capable, calm under pressure, gentle with frightened children, tireless in her care. The village noticed. Thomas, the shopkeeper, began nodding at both Whitford sisters when they entered his store. Women who'd once whispered about Elena now grudgingly included Catherine in their conversations. Slowly, the wall of suspicion cracked wider. One evening, as they walked back to the castle through the snow, Catherine stopped. "I understand now," she said quietly. "Understand what?" "Why you stayed." Catherine looked at the wild landscape around them, the frozen moors, the distant sea, the castle perched on its cliff. "It's not beautiful the way London is beautiful, but it's real, and that matters more." Elena smiled. "Yes, it does." Osham. Spring came to Greymore like a miracle. The snow melted, green pushed through frozen ground, birds returned, the sea changed from gray to something approaching blue. And with spring came visitors. The first was unexpected, a messenger from London carrying a letter sealed with unfamiliar wax. Elena opened it with trembling hands. Miss Whitford, you don't know me, but I know you. My name is Margaret Pemberton, the woman your sister mentioned in court. I read about the trial in the papers. I wanted you to know that your courage gave me courage. After 3 years of silence, I've come forward with my own testimony about Lord Ashford. 4 other women have done the same. He's being investigated now. His reputation is destroyed. He'll never hurt another woman. That happened because you refused to be silent, because you chose yourself. Thank you. You saved more lives than you know. Margaret Pemberton. Elena read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. She'd thought her choice was selfish, running from duty, abandoning responsibility, choosing her own freedom over everything she'd been taught to value. But it hadn't been selfish at all. It had been necessary, and it had saved lives. She showed the letter to Darian that evening. He read it in silence, then pulled her close. I told you, he said softly. You're braver than you know. I was just trying to survive. That's what bravery is. He tilted her face up. Choosing to survive when the world tells you to submit. Elena looked at him, this man who'd seen her at her lowest and believed in her anyway. I need to tell you something, she said. What? I love you. The words fell between them like stones into still water. Darian went very still. Elena, I know this wasn't what you planned, she continued quickly. I know you offered me refuge, not romance. I know we never talked about what this is between us. But I need you to know, I love you, not because you saved me, not because I'm grateful, but because you saw me when I was invisible, and you believed I was worth fighting for. Darian's expression shifted, surprise, hope, something that looked like wonder. I've loved you since the moment you stood in that courtroom and refused to be made small, he said roughly. Maybe before that. Maybe since the first night when you met me in the park, even though you were terrified. Elena's breath caught. Then why didn't you say anything? Because I didn't want you to feel obligated. You just escaped one cage. I wasn't going to trap you in another. His hands cupped her face. I wanted you to be free to choose, even if that meant choosing to leave. I'm not leaving, Elena whispered. This is home. You're home. Elena, marry me, she said. Darian stared at her. What? Marry me. Elena's voice strengthened. Not because society demands it. Not because my reputation needs saving. But because I want to spend my life with you. Because I want to build something real in this wild place. Because I love you, and I choose you, and I want the whole world to know it. For a long moment, Darian didn't speak. Then he started laughing, a real, genuine laugh that transformed his whole face. You're proposing to me? Someone has to. Elena smiled. You're too honorable to ask. I was waiting for the right moment. This is the right moment. She took his hands. So what do you say? Will you marry a disgraced London lady who barely knows how to pluck a chicken? Darian pulled her close, his eyes bright. Yes, he said simply. Yes, I'll marry you. He kissed her then, deep and sure, and Elena felt the last piece of her old life fall away. She wasn't Elena Whitford anymore, the obedient daughter, the perfect lady, the woman trapped in silk and expectations. She was just Elena, free, loved, home. They were married in the village church on a bright May morning. It was nothing like the wedding Elena had fled. No crowds of strangers, no elaborate decorations, no orchestra or 7-course meal. Just a simple ceremony with the people who mattered. The castle staff, the villagers who'd grudgingly learned to accept her, Sarah Crawford standing as witness. Catherine stood beside Elena, her eyes bright with tears. You look happy, she whispered. I am, Elena said, and meant it. The ceremony was brief. The vicar, a kind man who'd watched Elena earn her place in the community, spoke of partnership and choice, of building a life together through hardship and joy. When Darian slipped the ring on her finger, Elena felt something inside her settle. This was right. This was real. This was hers. They held the wedding breakfast in the castle's great hall, a rowdy, joyful affair with too much food and too much laughter. The villagers brought gifts, Practical things, mostly. Warm blankets, preserves, a hand-carved wooden spoon. Mrs. Brennan presented Elena with a set of iron skillets. "Since you finally learned not to burn everything," she said gruffly. Elena hugged her, and the housekeeper actually hugged back. As the celebration wound down, Elena found herself on the castle terrace, looking out at the wild landscape she'd come to love. Darian joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I was terrified when I came here," Elena said softly. "I thought I'd made a terrible mistake. Thought I'd never survive. And now? Now I can't imagine being anywhere else." She turned in his arms. "This place made me strong. You made me strong." "You were always strong," Darian corrected. "You just needed permission to be yourself." Elena kissed him, tasting salt air and promise. Behind them, music drifted from the great hall. Laughter echoed off stone walls. Catherine's voice rose in song, clear and bright. Life. Real, messy, beautiful life. "I got a letter yesterday," Elena said, "from another woman. She read about the trial. She's leaving her husband, a man who's been hurting her for years. She said my story gave her courage." Darian's arms tightened. "Elena, there are more," she continued. "Letters from women trapped in lives they didn't choose. Women who thought they had no options. Women who are starting to realize they can choose themselves." Her voice grew fierce. "We changed something, Darian. Not just for us. For them, too." "You changed something," he corrected. "I just gave you a place to land. You gave me everything." Elena met his eyes. "And I want to give it forward. I want Greymore to be a place where women can come when they need refuge, when they need to remember they're more than what the world tells them to be." Darian studied her face. "You want to turn the castle into a sanctuary?" "Yes. It won't be easy. People will talk." "Let them talk." Elena smiled. "We've survived worse." Darian kissed her forehead. "Then we'll do it. Together." Word spread faster than fire. By summer's end, 3 women had arrived at Greymore, sent by Margaret Pemberton's quiet network, seeking refuge from marriages or situations they couldn't escape. Elena and Catherine welcomed them. Mrs. Brennan grumbled but made room. The village watched with suspicious eyes that slowly, grudgingly, softened. Because the women worked, they learned, they healed, and one by one they found themselves again. By autumn, 5 more had come. By winter, the castle housed 12 women, all of them learning to survive, to thrive, to choose themselves in a world that had never given them permission. Elena stood in the courtyard one December morning, watching Sarah Crawford teach 3 of the women basic healing skills. Catherine supervised repairs on the east wing, her voice confident and sure. Mrs. Brennan directed the kitchen with her usual iron efficiency. And Darian stood beside Elena, his hand warm in hers. "We did it," he said softly. "We're still doing it," Elena corrected. "This is just the beginning." She was right. Over the following years, Greymore became something London society whispered about in scandalized tones. A place where women went to escape, to heal, to find themselves. Some stayed, some left when they were ready, stronger than they'd arrived. But all of them left changed. Elena's story spread. Not the sanitized version her father would have preferred, but the real one. The story of a woman who chose freedom over comfort, who survived when everyone expected her to fail, who built something beautiful in a harsh land. And slowly, impossibly, other women began making the same choice, leaving bad marriages, refusing unwanted engagements, choosing themselves over duty. The world didn't change overnight, but it changed. One choice at a time. One brave woman at a time. And it started with a girl in a ballroom who looked at a wild stranger and saw a possibility, who chose herself when the world demanded she choose obedience, who survived when survival seemed impossible. 3 years after the trial, Elena received one final letter from London. It was from her mother. She opened it with steady hands, no longer afraid of what it might contain. "Elena, I have read about what you've built at Greymore. About the women you've helped, the lives you've changed. I won't apologize for the choices I made. I still believe I was protecting you, even if you disagree. But I wanted you to know, your sister Margaret, you remember her, your father's youngest sister, came to me last month. She's been trapped in a terrible marriage for 15 years. She asked if the stories about Graymore were true. I told her yes. She's leaving her husband. She'll arrive at your gates next week. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect reconciliation. But I wanted you to know you were right and I was wrong. I hope that means something. Your mother, Elena, folded the letter carefully. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was acknowledgement, and that was enough. She showed it to Darian that evening. Your Aunt Margaret is coming, he said. Yes, we'll make room. We always do. Darian pulled her close, and they stood together on the terrace, watching the sun set over the wild northern sea. Do you ever regret it? He asked. Leaving London? Losing your family? Elena thought about it, really thought. She thought of the girl she'd been. Trapped, suffocating, dying slowly in silk and propriety. She thought of the woman she'd become. Strong, free, building something that mattered. No, she said simply. Not for a second. And she meant it. Because some cages are gilded, beautiful, comfortable, but they're still cages. And Elena Wolfe, no longer Whitford, no longer property, no longer anyone's to control, had chosen freedom, had chosen herself, had chosen life. And in doing so, had shown countless other women that they could choose too. That was worth everything she'd lost. And more than everything she'd gained. The wild northern wind blew through her hair, carrying the salt-sharp scent of freedom. And Elena smiled. She was home. She was home. The words settled into Elena's bones like truth, like bedrock, like the foundation of everything she'd built. The wind carried the sharp bite of approaching winter, but she no longer feared the cold. She'd survived 3 northern winters now, had learned that survival wasn't about comfort, it was about resilience. Darian's arms tightened around her. What are you thinking? That Margaret arrives in 3 days, Elena said, and we need to prepare the West Wing. Always practical. He kissed her temple. That's one of the things I love about you. One of many things, I hope. Infinite things. They stood together as darkness fell over Graymore, the castle lights beginning to glow like promises in the gathering night. Margaret Whitford arrived on a gray morning, her carriage mud-splattered and her face hollow with exhaustion and fear. Elena met her at the gates. Her aunt, a woman she barely remembered from childhood gatherings, looked older than her 43 years. Bruises yellowed on her wrists, poorly hidden by long sleeves. Aunt Margaret, Elena said gently. Her aunt's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know where else to go. You came to the right place. Elena helped her from the carriage. You're safe now. Margaret collapsed into her arms, sobbing, great wrenching sounds that spoke of years of silence, of pain, of endurance finally breaking. Elena held her, remembering her own terror when she'd first arrived, remembering what it felt like to finally let the mask fall. I've got you, she whispered. You're home. Catherine appeared in the doorway, her expression softening when she saw their aunt. Come inside, she said. We'll take care of you. They settled Margaret in a room in the West Wing, simple but warm, with a fire already burning and thick blankets on the bed. Mrs. Brennan brought tea and bread. Sarah Crawford was called to tend the bruises. Margaret sat by the fire, hands wrapped around her teacup, staring into the flames. I should have come sooner, she said quietly. I read about your trial 3 years ago, about what you did, but I was too afraid. Fear is a cage stronger than iron, Elena said, sitting beside her. I know. My husband, Margaret's voice broke. He'll come looking for me. Let him come. Elena's voice was steel. He won't touch you here. You can't know that. Yes, I can. Elena met her aunt's eyes. Because I know what it's like to have the world tell you you're powerless. And I know what it's like to discover they're wrong. Margaret studied her niece's face. This young woman who'd been a frightened girl 3 years ago and was now something fierce and unbreakable. How did you do it? She whispered. How did you become so brave? I didn't become brave, Elena said softly. I just got tired of being afraid. Margaret's husband arrived 2 weeks later. Lord Richard Pemberton, a corpulent man with cold eyes and an entitled sneer, rode up to Graymore's gates with 4 men and a magistrate's order demanding his wife's return. Darien met them in the courtyard, his face carved from winter ice. "You're on my land," he said quietly. "State your business or leave." "I'm here for my wife," Pemberton said. "She's been taken in by your establishment." He spat the word like poison. "I demand her immediate return." "Lady Margaret came here of her own free will." "She's not of sound mind." "She's of perfectly sound mind," Elena said, stepping out of the castle. "She's just done with being beaten." Pemberton's face purpled. "How dare you?" "The bruises speak for themselves." Elena's voice cut like a blade. "Sarah Crawford documented every injury when your wife arrived. We have testimony, evidence, witnesses. A wife's place is with her husband, not when her husband tries to kill her." Silence crashed through the courtyard. Pemberton dismounted, advancing on Elena with fury in his eyes. "You poisoned her mind against me!" Darien moved between them, his hand dropping to the sword at his hip. "That's far enough," he said, his voice deadly quiet. Pemberton stopped, eyeing the blade. "You can't keep her. The law says a husband can't murder his wife," Elena interrupted. "And we have evidence you tried, multiple times." "That's a lie, is it?" Catherine appeared beside Elena, holding a leather folder. "Then explain the physician's reports we obtained, the ones documenting 3 suspicious injuries over the past 5 years, the testimony from servants who heard screaming, the letters Margaret wrote to her sister describing her fear." Pemberton's face went white. "Where did you get—" "We have friends," Elena said simply. "People who believe women deserve to live without fear. People who've been quietly collecting evidence against men like you for years." The magistrate who'd accompanied Pemberton shifted uncomfortably. "Lord Pemberton, if there's evidence of abuse—" "There's no evidence!" Pemberton roared. "This is all fabrication, lies told by hysterical women." "Then you won't mind a formal inquiry," Darien said. "We'll present our evidence to a court. Let them decide." Pemberton's jaw clenched. He looked at the castle, at Darien's hand on his sword, at the 3 women standing united against him, and realized he'd lost. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes," Elena said quietly. "It is." Pemberton mounted his horse, his face twisted with impotent rage. He rode away with his men, the magistrate following more slowly, his expression thoughtful. When they were gone, Margaret appeared in the castle doorway, her face streaked with tears. "You stood up to him," she whispered. "We all did," Elena said. "That's what we do here. We stand together." Margaret crossed the courtyard and pulled Elena into a fierce embrace. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you for showing me I could be strong." "You were always strong," Elena said, holding her tight. "You just needed to remember it." The news spread like wildfire. Within weeks, London society was ablaze with scandal. The Duke and Duchess of Greymoor had publicly defied Lord Richard Pemberton, accused him of abuse, and refused to return his wife. Some condemned them, but others, quietly, cautiously, began to whisper support. More letters arrived. More women seeking refuge. By spring, Greymoor housed 23 women. By summer, 30. They expanded into the unused wings of the castle, built new cottages on the estate grounds, hired more staff from the village, women who'd struggled to feed their families and now found steady work and purpose. The village itself began to change. The men who'd once looked at Elena with suspicion now nodded respectfully when she passed. The women who'd whispered about scandal now brought their daughters to learn from Sarah Crawford and the other healers. Thomas, the shopkeeper, stopped Elena one afternoon. "My daughter wants to learn reading and writing," he said gruffly. "I hear you teach." "I do," Elena said. "Send her up tomorrow." Within a month, 12 village girls were attending lessons at the castle, learning to read, write, do sums, think for themselves. "You're building something extraordinary," Darien said one evening, watching Elena teach a group of women and girls in the castle's great hall. "We're building it," Elena corrected. "Together." "No." He pulled her aside, his eyes bright. "Elena, this is yours. Your vision, your courage. I just gave you the space to make it real." She kissed him. "Then I'm grateful every day that you saw what I could become." "I just saw who you already were." In the autumn of their 5th year at Greymoor, Elena discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with equal parts joy and terror. "What if I'm not ready?" she asked Darian, pacing their chambers. What if I can't? You'll be magnificent, he said, pulling her close. You're already changing the world for dozens of women. You'll change it for our child too. But a child needs a mother who's strong, who knows herself, who'll teach them to be brave. Darian cupped her face. That's exactly who you are. Their daughter was born in the spring, a fierce, howling thing with dark hair and storm-gray eyes. They named her Catherine Margaret Wolfe. When Elena held her daughter for the first time, something shifted in her chest. A fierce, protective love that made everything she'd fought for suddenly sharper, clearer, more vital. This child would grow up free, would never know the cage Elena had escaped, would be taught that her worth wasn't dependent on marriage or status or obedience, would be taught to choose herself. She's perfect, Catherine, the aunt, not the baby, whispered, tears streaming down her face. She's ours, Elena said. All of ours. And she was. Little Catherine grew up surrounded by women who'd fought for their freedom, who taught her strength and kindness in equal measure, who showed her that love wasn't ownership and marriage wasn't surrender. The castle became her playground, the village, her classroom, the wild northern landscape, her inheritance. And Elena watched her daughter run fearless through the world she'd built and felt something like peace. Charles. The real test came in their 7th year at Greymore. Word reached them that Parliament was debating a new law, one that would give women the right to own property independently of their husbands, to divorce in cases of abuse, to have legal recourse against violence. It was unprecedented, revolutionary, and it was being fiercely opposed by men who believed the old order should never change. They're holding a hearing, Darian said, reading the letter from their solicitor, collecting testimony from both sides. Harrison thinks we should testify. Elena's stomach nodded. In London? Yes. She hadn't been back to London in 7 years, had built a life so far from that glittering cage she'd almost forgotten it existed. I don't know if I can face them again, she admitted. You don't have to, Darian said immediately. We can send a written statement. No. Elena straightened her spine. If this law can help women the way Greymore has, then I need to speak. They need to hear what happens when women are given freedom. Catherine gripped her hand. Then we'll go together, all of us. All of us? Every woman at Greymore who's willing to testify. Catherine's eyes blazed. Let them see what we've built. Let them hear 30 voices instead of one. Elena's throat tightened. You do that? You gave us our lives back, Margaret said from the doorway. The least we can do is fight for others to have the same chance. They arrived in London like an invading army. 32 women from Greymore, plus Darian, Catherine, and 3-year-old Catherine Margaret. They took over an entire inn, their presence impossible to ignore. The hearing was held in a grand parliamentary chamber, packed with lords, magistrates, journalists, and curious onlookers. Elena sat in the witness chair, her daughter on her lap, facing the panel of stern-faced men who would decide the law's fate. Duchess of Greymore, the lead magistrate said, you've been called to testify about your establishment. It's not an establishment, Elena said clearly. It's a refuge, a place where women who've been hurt can heal and rebuild their lives. Some would say you're encouraging women to abandon their husbands and duties. I'm encouraging women to survive, Elena interrupted. There's a difference. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Can you provide examples of women you've helped? Another magistrate asked. Elena gestured to the gallery where the Greymore women sat. Margaret Pemberton, she said. Her husband beat her for 15 years. She came to us broken and terrified. Now she runs our textile workshop and supports herself. Margaret stood, her spine straight, her bruises long healed. Sarah Miller, Elena continued, widowed at 19 with 2 children and no means of support. She learned healing arts at Greymore. Now she's apprenticed to our village midwife. Sarah stood, her children beside her. Ann Thompson, forced into an engagement at 16 to a man 3 times her age who made it clear what kind of marriage he expected. She fled to Greymore. Now she teaches reading and writing to village children. One by one, the women stood. 32 stories, 32 lives reclaimed. The chamber fell silent. These women, Elena said, her voice ringing clear, were told they had no value except as wives and mothers, that their purpose was obedience. that their pain didn't matter. She held her daughter closer. We taught them something different. We taught them they were worth saving, worth fighting for, worth everything. But you've disrupted families, a lord protested. We've saved lives, Elena shot back. And if that disrupts families built on violence and control, then good. Those families deserve to be disrupted. You're advocating for the dissolution of marriage itself. I'm advocating for marriages built on choice instead of ownership, Elena said fiercely. I'm advocating for women to have the right to leave situations that are killing them. I'm advocating for basic human dignity. She stood, still holding her daughter. 7 years ago, I was one of you, she said, addressing the entire chamber. Born into privilege, raised for a perfect marriage, taught that my only value was in obedience, and I was dying. Slowly, quietly, but dying nonetheless. Her voice didn't waver. When I chose to save myself, the world called me insane, tried to have me locked away, destroyed my reputation and my family connections. She paused. But I survived. And I built something beautiful in the ruins of what I left behind. She gestured to the women in the gallery. These women are proof that survival is possible, that freedom isn't just a privilege for men, that women are capable of extraordinary things when given the chance. Little Catherine squirmed in her arms, and Elena set her down. The child ran to Darian, who caught her up, his eyes never leaving his wife. This law you're debating, Elena continued, isn't radical. It's mercy. It's justice. It's the bare minimum of what women deserve. Her voice grew stronger. And if you vote against it, you're choosing cruelty. You're choosing to keep women trapped in cages they can't escape. She locked eyes with each magistrate in turn. I'm living proof that those cages can be broken, that women can survive, thrive, build entire worlds when given freedom. She took a breath. The question is, are you brave enough to let them? The chamber erupted. Half the room was shouting, some in support, others in outrage. The magistrates banged their gavels, calling for order. Elena returned to her seat, her heart pounding. Darian's hand found hers. That was extraordinary, he whispered. It was the truth. One by one, the other Greymore women testified. Each told their story, brutal, honest, unflinching. Each one an indictment of a system that had failed them. By the time the last woman finished, even the most hardened opponents looked shaken. The vote was scheduled for the following week. They stayed in London waiting. Elena took her daughter through the city she'd fled, showing her the grand houses, the manicured parks, the glittering ballrooms visible through tall windows. It's very pretty, little Catherine said, but I like home better. Elena laughed. So do I, sweetheart. So do I. On the day of the vote, they packed the gallery again. All 32 women, plus dozens more who'd heard about the hearing and come to witness history. The debate raged for hours. Lords stood and thundered about the sanctity of marriage, the natural order, the dangers of giving women too much freedom. Others, fewer but growing, spoke of justice, mercy, basic human rights. Finally, the presiding magistrate called for the vote. Elena held her breath. One by one, the votes were cast. The tally climbed, and when the final count was announced, the chamber fell silent. The law had passed. By 3 votes. 3. But it had passed. Women would have the right to own property, to divorce in cases of abuse, to have legal recourse against violence. It wasn't everything. It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning. The gallery erupted in cheers. Women wept, embraced, shouted with joy. Elena stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. They'd won. Not just for themselves, but for every woman who would come after them. For daughters who would grow up with more choices than their mothers had. For futures that weren't cages. Catherine pulled her into a fierce hug. We did it, she sobbed. We actually did it. We changed the world, Elena whispered. Darian wrapped his arms around both of them, little Catherine squeezed between. And in that moment, Elena felt the last shadow of her old life dissolve. She wasn't running anymore. She was building. But they returned to Greymore as heroes. The village turned out to welcome them home, men, women, and children lining the road from the coast, cheering and waving. Thomas, the shopkeeper, had organized a celebration in the town square. You've done us proud, he said gruffly, shaking Elena's hand. All of you. Sarah Crawford pulled Elena aside, her eyes bright with tears. My granddaughter will grow up in a different world because of you, she said. She'll have choices I never dreamed of. We did it together, Elena said. All of us. Maybe. But you started it. Sarah squeezed her hand. Don't forget that. The celebration lasted 3 days. Dancing, feasting, stories told and retold until they became legend. And through it all, Elena felt the weight of what they'd accomplished settling into her bones. They hadn't just survived, they'd changed everything. The years that followed brought transformation. More women came to Graymore, not just seeking refuge now, but seeking education, opportunity, a different way of living. They expanded the estate, built workshops and schools, created a community where women could be whole. The village prospered. Young girls grew up learning to read and write alongside their brothers. Women opened businesses, made choices, lived lives they designed themselves. And slowly, other places began to follow Graymore's example. A sanctuary opened in Yorkshire, another in Cornwall. Within 10 years, there were 15 across England, all built on the model Elena had pioneered. Letters arrived constantly, women seeking advice, men asking how to support their wives and daughters, communities wanting to know how to create change. Elena answered everyone. On her 40th birthday, she stood on Graymore's terrace, the same place where she'd once stood terrified and uncertain, and watched her daughter play in the courtyard below. Catherine Margaret was 13 now, fierce and brilliant and absolutely fearless. She was learning estate management from Darian, healing from Sarah Crawford, business from the workshop women. She would inherit Graymore someday, and she would never know what it meant to be caged. What are you thinking? Darian asked, joining her. That we did it, Elena said softly. We actually built something that will outlast us. You built it. We built it. She took his hand, and now others will build on what we started. Darian pulled her close, and they stood together as they had so many times before, watching the sun set over the wild northern sea. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd stayed? He asked. If you'd married Ashford? Elena considered the question honestly. I'd be dead, she said simply. Maybe not physically, but everything that mattered, the part of me that fought and dreamed and refused to be small, that would have died. She looked up at him. You saved that part of me. No, Darian said gently. You saved yourself. I just gave you a place to do it. Then I'm grateful every day that you were at that ball, that you saw me, that you believed I was worth the fight. You were always worth it. He kissed her forehead. You just needed to believe it too. Below, little Catherine called up to them, waving excitedly about some discovery in the garden. Elena waved back, her heart full. This was her legacy. Not just the sanctuary she'd built or the laws she'd helped change, but this, her daughter, growing up free and strong and certain of her worth. Her sister, running the textile workshop and teaching other women to be independent. Her Aunt Margaret, finally at peace after a lifetime of pain. The hundreds of women who'd passed through Graymore's gates and left stronger than they arrived. The thousands more who would come in the years ahead. This was what courage built. Not perfection, not utopia, but possibility. A world where women could choose, could survive, could thrive. A world where the cages could be broken. And standing on that terrace, watching the life she'd built unfold around her, Elena finally understood what freedom meant. It wasn't the absence of hardship, wasn't comfort or ease or safety. It was the right to choose your own path, even when the world said no. To fight for yourself, even when fighting seemed impossible. To survive, and then to help others survive. To build something beautiful in the ruins of what you left behind. Elena had done that, and the legacy would ripple forward through her daughter, through the women she'd helped, through the laws that had changed and the minds that had opened. One choice at a time, one brave act at a time. One woman remembering she was worth saving, worth fighting for, worth everything. 20 years later, Elena stood in the same courtroom where she'd once fought for her freedom. But this time, she wasn't on trial. She was receiving an honor. The Crown had established an award for extraordinary service to women's welfare. Elena was the first recipient. She accepted the medal with shaking hands, looking out at the packed gallery. Catherine Margaret sat in the front row, now 33 and running Greymore with the same fierce determination her mother had pioneered. Beside her sat Elena's granddaughter, a tiny thing named Margaret Elena, who would grow up in a world her great-grandmother had helped create. The women of Greymore filled the rest of the gallery. Hundreds of them, some she'd known for decades, others recent arrivals, all of them proof that freedom was possible. The ceremony official spoke of Elena's courage, her vision, her impact. But when it was Elena's turn to speak, she said only this: "I'm not a hero. I was just a scared girl who got tired of being afraid." Her voice carried through the silent chamber. "Everything I built because someone believed I could. And then I believed it too." She looked at the women in the gallery. "The real heroes are every woman who chooses herself when the world demands obedience, who survives when survival seems impossible, who fights for freedom even when the cost is everything." Her voice strengthened. "Those women changed the world. I just showed them it could be done." She held up the medal. "This isn't mine. It belongs to every woman who refused to be small. Every woman who broke her cage. Every woman who chose courage over comfort." She looked directly at her granddaughter. "And every girl who will grow up free because we fought for that freedom." The gallery erupted in applause, and Elena felt the journey that had started in a glittering London ballroom 40 years ago finally come full circle. She'd been terrified that night, trapped, dying slowly in silk and expectations. Now she stood free, honored, surrounded by the legacy of her courage. It had cost everything, and it had been worth everything. Elena died at 73, in her sleep, in the castle she'd made home. Darian had passed 2 years before, peacefully, surrounded by family, his hand in hers. They buried her on the cliffs overlooking the sea she'd loved, with a simple stone that read, "Elena Wolf, 1803 to 1876. She chose freedom. Hundreds attended the funeral, women who'd passed through Greymore, their daughters, their granddaughters, village families whose lives had been changed by her work, magistrates and lawmakers who'd been inspired by her testimony. Catherine Margaret gave the eulogy, her voice strong despite her tears. "My mother taught me that cages are made of lies," she said. "Lies about who we're supposed to be, what we're allowed to want, how small we're supposed to make ourselves to fit into the world's expectations." She looked out at the crowd. "She taught me that breaking those cages is the bravest thing a person can do, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary." She placed a sprig of heather on the grave, the same wild flower that grew across Greymore's moors. "She taught me to be free, and in doing so, she taught thousands of other women the same lesson." Catherine Margaret looked at her own daughter, standing solemn and grave-eyed beside her. Her legacy isn't the sanctuary she built or the laws she changed. It's the belief, passed from mother to daughter, from woman to woman, that we are worth fighting for, that our freedom matters, that our choices are our own. She smiled through tears. That's the world she gave us, a world where women can choose themselves. And we'll keep building on it, one choice at a time, one brave act at a time, until every cage is broken and every woman is free. The wind blew across the cliffs, carrying the scent of salt and heather and wild, endless possibility. And somewhere in that wind, Elena's spirit smiled. Because she'd done it. She'd chosen herself when the world demanded obedience. She'd survived when survival seemed impossible. She'd built freedom where there had been only cages. And she'd left behind a legacy that would ripple forward through generations, teaching daughters and granddaughters and great-granddaughters that they were worth saving, worth fighting for, worth everything. That courage was choosing yourself even when the cost was high. That freedom was worth any price. That some cages were meant to be broken. And that one woman, choosing to be brave, could change the entire world. The waves crashed against the cliffs. The wind whispered through the heather. And Elena's story became legend, not of a perfect woman, but of a real one, who was scared, who fought anyway, who chose freedom, and in doing so, set countless others free. She was home. The words settled into Elena's bones like truth, like bedrock, like the foundation of everything she'd built. The wind carried the sharp bite of approaching winter, but she no longer feared the cold. She'd survived 3 northern winters now, had learned that survival wasn't about comfort, it was about resilience. Darian's arms tightened around her. "What are you thinking?" "That Margaret arrives in 3 days. Elena said, "and we need to prepare the West Wing." "Always practical." He kissed her temple. "That's one of the things I love about you. One of many things, I hope. Infinite things." They stood together as darkness fell over Greymore, the castle lights beginning to glow like promises in the gathering night. Beyond the courtyard, the village lights flickered to life one by one, each window a small beacon against the winter dark. Elena could hear the distant sound of the sea, the wind moving through the bare trees, the familiar creaks and sighs of the castle settling around them. This place had become her entire world. Not the glittering ballrooms of London, not the carefully cultivated gardens and marble halls. This rough, wild, beautiful place where survival meant something, where every day was earned, where freedom tasted like salt air and hard work. "Do you ever miss it?" Darian asked, as if reading her thoughts. "London? The life you left behind?" Elena considered the question honestly. "I miss nothing about the cage," she said. "But sometimes I wonder about the girl I was. If she could see me now, would she recognize herself?" "She'd be proud," Darian said with certainty. "I hope so." Elena turned in his arms, looking up at his weathered face. 3 years at Greymore had changed him too. The haunted look that had shadowed his eyes when they first met had faded, replaced by something calmer, more settled. "I hope she'd understand that everything we lost was worth everything we gained." Margaret Whitford arrived on a grey morning 3 days later, her carriage mud-splattered and listing slightly to one side from the rough northern roads. Elena met her at the gates with Catherine beside her, both wrapped in thick wool cloaks against the biting wind. Her aunt, a woman she barely remembered from childhood gatherings, just a pale face at the edge of family dinners, looked older than her 43 years. Bruises yellowed on her wrists, poorly hidden by long sleeves that had been pulled down hastily when the carriage door opened. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow, her movements careful and measured like someone who'd learned to take up as little space as possible. "Aunt Margaret," Elena said gently, stepping forward. Her aunt's eyes filled with tears. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Just a small, broken sound that spoke of years of silence, of swallowed screams, of endurance that had finally reached its breaking point. "I didn't know where else to go," she finally whispered. "You came to the right place." Elena helped her from the carriage, feeling how thin her aunt had become, how her bones seemed too close to the surface. "You're safe now." Margaret collapsed into her arms then, sobbing, great wrenching sounds that came from somewhere deep and terrible. Her whole body shook with it, years of held-back grief and fear finally breaking free. Elena held her, remembering her own terror when she'd first arrived at Greymore, remembering what it felt like to finally let the mask fall, to stop pretending everything was fine, to acknowledge the truth of your own suffering. "I've got you," she whispered, stroking her aunt's hair. "You're home now. You're safe. He can't hurt you here." Catherine appeared on Margaret's other side, her expression a mixture of fury and compassion. She'd heard the stories, read the letters, knew what their aunt had endured. But seeing it, seeing the physical evidence of violence, the broken spirit trying to rebuild itself, that was different. "Come inside," Catherine said, her voice thick with emotion. "We'll take care of you." They settled Margaret in a room in the West Wing, simple but warm, with a fire already crackling in the grate and thick blankets piled on the bed. The windows looked out over the moors, wild and empty and free. No neighbors close enough to hear screaming, no watching eyes, no judgment. Mrs. Brennan appeared with tea and bread, her usual gruffness softened by genuine concern. "Eat something," she ordered, setting the tray down. "Your skin and bones." Margaret stared at the food like she'd forgotten what it was for. Sarah Crawford arrived an hour later, called up from the village to tend the injuries. The midwife's face remained carefully neutral as she examined the bruises, the half-healed cuts, the evidence of violence both recent and long-standing. "How long?" Sarah asked quietly. 15 years, Margaret whispered. "Since the wedding night." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Just mixed her salves and wrapped the wounds with gentle, capable hands. When she finished, she sat beside Margaret on the bed. "You survived," she said simply. "That takes more strength than most people ever need. You're stronger than you know." Margaret shook her head. "I'm not strong. If I was strong, I would have left years ago. Leaving takes a different kind of strength, Elena said from the doorway. The kind that only comes when you're ready. You're here now. That's what matters. Margaret sat by the fire after they left, hands wrapped around her teacup, staring into the flames. Elena brought her own chair close, sitting in companionable silence. Sometimes words weren't what was needed. Sometimes just the presence of another person, someone who understood, was enough. I should have come sooner, Margaret said finally, her voice barely audible. I read about your trial 3 years ago, about what you did, about this place. But I was too afraid. Fear is a cage stronger than iron, Elena said. I know. My husband, Margaret's voice cracked. He'll come looking for me. He'll say I'm insane, that I need to come home, that I'm not capable of making decisions for myself. Let him come. Elena's voice was steel wrapped in silk. He won't touch you here. We have laws now, evidence, witnesses. We have people who believe women when they speak. It's not perfect, but it's more than we had before. You can't know that he won't. Yes, I can. Elena met her aunt's terrified gaze with calm certainty. Because I know what it's like to have the world tell you you're powerless. I know what it's like to believe them. And I know what it's like to discover they're wrong. Margaret studied her niece's face. This young woman who'd been a frightened girl in a ballroom 3 years ago and was now something fierce and unbreakable, changed by hardship into something stronger than silk and propriety could ever create. How did you do it? She whispered. How did you become so brave? I didn't become brave, Elena said softly. I just got tired of being afraid. There's a difference. Bravery makes it sound noble, like I wasn't terrified every single day, but I was. I still am sometimes. The difference is, I stopped letting fear make my decisions for me. I don't know if I can do that. You already have. Elena reached over and squeezed her aunt's hand. You're here, aren't you? You left. You chose yourself. That's the hardest part. Everything else is just learning to live with that choice. Otto. Margaret's husband arrived 2 weeks later, just as Elena had known he would. Lord Richard Pemberton, a corpulent man with cold, calculating eyes and an entitled sneer that spoke of decades of getting exactly what he wanted, rode up to Greymoor's gates with 4 hired men and a magistrate's order demanding his wife's immediate return. Word reached the castle before he did. One of the village boys had spotted the riders on the coast road and run ahead to warn them. By the time Pemberton arrived, Darien was waiting in the courtyard, dressed for battle in the formal clothes of his station, looking every inch the duke and war hero he was. You're on my land, Darien said quietly, his voice carrying across the courtyard with military precision. State your business or leave. Pemberton dismounted with difficulty, his bulk making the movement graceless. I'm here for my wife, he said, his voice dripping with false reasonableness. She's been taken in by your establishment. He spat the word like it tasted foul. She's not well, not in her right mind. I demand her immediate return so she can receive proper care. Lady Margaret came here of her own free will, Darien replied, his tone never rising but somehow becoming more dangerous. She's of sound mind and body. Well, her mind is sound. Her body bears the marks of your care. How dare you? The bruises speak for themselves. Elena stepped out of the castle, Catherine at her side, both women dressed simply but standing with the kind of authority that came from absolute moral certainty. Sarah Crawford, our village midwife, and a woman respected by every magistrate in 3 counties, documented every injury when your wife arrived. We have testimony, evidence, witnesses willing to swear in court about what they saw. Pemberton's face began to purple, a vein throbbing at his temple. You've poisoned her mind against me, filled her head with lies and nonsense about independence and freedom. A wife's proper place is with her husband. Not when her husband tries to kill her, Elena interrupted, her voice sharp as broken glass. Silence crashed through the courtyard like a physical thing. The hired men shifted uncomfortably. Even Pemberton seemed taken aback by the directness of the accusation. That's slander, he hissed. Vicious, unfounded slander. I could have you arrested. Try it, Catherine said, stepping forward with a leather folder in her hands. We have physicians' reports documenting 3 suspicious injuries over the past 5 years. Injuries that your wife's own doctor noted as inconsistent with her explanations. We have testimony from 4 former servants who left your employ because they couldn't stomach what they witnessed. We have letters Margaret wrote to her sister describing her fear, her pain, her certainty that one day you would go too far, and she would die. She opened the folder, pulling out page after page of documented evidence. We've been building this case for 2 weeks, Lord Pemberton. Every piece of paper here is sworn testimony, physician's notes, legal documentation. You want to fight us in court? Please, let's go. I would love to see you try to explain away 15 years of violence. Pemberton's face had gone from purple to an ugly grayish white. He looked at the papers, at the 3 people standing united against him, at the castle staff who'd gathered to watch, their faces hard and unsympathetic. Where did you get... His voice was strangled. Those documents are private. Nothing is private when it involves a crime, Elena said. An assault is a crime, Lord Pemberton, even when the victim is your wife, especially when the victim is your wife. The magistrate who had accompanied Pemberton, a young man who'd been looking increasingly uncomfortable, cleared his throat. Lord Pemberton, if there's evidence of abuse, as these ladies claim— There's no evidence, Pemberton roared, his composure finally shattering completely. This is all fabrication, lies told by hysterical women who don't understand the natural order of marriage. A husband has rights over his wife. The law says— The law is changing, Darian said quietly, his hand dropping to rest on the pommel of his sword, a casual gesture that somehow conveyed absolute readiness for violence. And even the old laws don't permit murder, which is what you would have committed eventually if Margaret had stayed. The physician who treated her broken ribs 2 years ago noted that the injury could have punctured a lung, Catherine said, reading from one of the documents. You told everyone she fell downstairs, but there are no stairs in your country house that could cause that pattern of injury. The doctor knew. He just didn't say anything because men like you protect each other. She looked up, her eyes blazing. But we're done with that. Done with silence, done with protection. You want your wife back? Then you'll face a formal inquiry. We'll present our evidence to a court. We'll let them decide whether a man who breaks his wife's bones and locks her in rooms for days without food is fit to have custody of anyone. Pemberton looked around wildly, as if searching for support. His hired men wouldn't meet his eyes. The magistrate was studying the documents Catherine had provided with growing alarm. The castle staff watched with stony faces. He was alone, completely, utterly alone. And he realized it. This isn't over, he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. I have rights. The law? The law is on the side of truth, Elena said, and the truth is that you're a violent man who hurt someone weaker than you for 15 years because you could, because society let you, because no one stopped you. Her voice grew harder. We're stopping you now, and we'll stop every man like you that we can find. Pemberton mounted his horse clumsily, his hands shaking with rage and something that might have been fear. He looked at the castle, at the women standing united against him, at the evidence of his crimes laid bare for everyone to see. You'll regret this, he spat. No, Darian said calmly. You will, because now everyone knows what you are, and you'll never be able to hide behind respectability again. Pemberton jerked his horse's reins and rode away, his hired men following. The magistrate lingered, approaching Catherine cautiously. May I examine those documents more closely? He asked. Of course. Catherine handed him the folder. We want this investigated properly. We want justice. The magistrate nodded slowly. I'll present this to the circuit court. If what you claim is true, it is true, Catherine said firmly. Every word. When the magistrate finally left, promising a formal inquiry within the month, Margaret appeared in the castle doorway. She'd watched the entire confrontation from a window, too afraid to show herself but unable to look away. Her face was streaked with tears, but her eyes held something Elena recognized. Hope. You stood up to him, Margaret whispered, walking slowly into the courtyard like someone testing ice they weren't sure would hold. You faced him down and he ran. We all did, Elena said, crossing to her aunt and taking her hands. That's what we do here, Margaret. We stand together. We fight together. We protect each other. Margaret looked at the 3 of them, Elena, Catherine, Darian, and then at Mrs. Brennan and the other staff who'd gathered to witness. I've never had anyone fight for me before, she said, her voice breaking. Never had anyone believe me. Never had anyone care enough to... She couldn't finish, overcome with emotion. Catherine pulled her into a fierce embrace. You have us now. You have this place. You have a chance to build a life where no one hurts you, where you matter, where you're safe. Margaret sobbed into her niece's shoulder, and Elena watched something fundamental shift in her aunt's bearing. The careful, hunted quality that had marked her movements was beginning to ease, replaced by the first fragile shoots of something stronger. Survival. And maybe, eventually, freedom. Minta. The news of Pemberton's confrontation spread through the village and beyond like wildfire on dry grass. Within weeks, London society was ablaze with scandal, not just about Lord Richard Pemberton and the accusations leveled against him, but about the Duke and Duchess of Greymoor and their sanctuary for wayward women. Some condemned them, of course, called Elena a home wrecker, accused her of encouraging wives to abandon their duties, painted Greymoor as a den of rebellion and impropriety. But others, quietly, cautiously, in whispered conversations in drawing rooms and parlors across England, began to voice support. Women who'd suffered in silence found courage to speak. Men who'd witnessed abuse but felt powerless to intervene discovered they weren't alone. And slowly, impossibly, the conversation began to change. More letters arrived at Greymoor. Dozens at first, then hundreds. Women seeking refuge, women seeking advice. Women simply wanting to know that somewhere in the world there was a place where they mattered more than their husbands' reputations. Elena read every letter, answered as many as she could, and when she couldn't answer them all, Catherine helped. Then Mrs. Brennan, surprisingly. Then several of the women who'd found refuge at Greymoor and wanted to help others do the same. By the following spring, Greymoor housed 23 women. By summer, 30. They ranged in age from 17 to 62, came from all stations of life, carried stories that ranged from heartbreaking to horrifying. But they all shared one thing, the courage to choose themselves. The castle swelled with life. They expanded into the unused wings that had stood empty for decades, dust-covered and forgotten. Darien hired builders from the village to make repairs, creating rooms that were simple but comfortable. Mrs. Brennan organized work rotations. Everyone contributed, from the Duchess to the newest arrival. No one was above scrubbing floors or tending vegetables. It created a strange democracy that would have been unthinkable in London society. Women who would never have spoken to each other in their old lives now worked side by side, learning that survival didn't care about social station. The village itself began to change too. The men who'd once looked at Elena with suspicion now nodded respectfully when she passed through the market square. Some, not all but some, began to reconsider their own marriages, their own treatment of wives and daughters. The women of the village, initially wary of the London ladies invading their territory, slowly began to see the refuge as something valuable, a place their own daughters could go if needed, a safety net that hadn't existed before. Thomas, the shopkeeper, stopped Elena one afternoon as she was purchasing supplies. "My daughter wants to learn reading and writing," he said gruffly, not quite meeting her eyes. "I hear you teach." Elena's heart lifted. "I do. Send her up to the castle tomorrow afternoon. We have lessons 3 times a week." "She's only 8. Perfect age to start." Elena smiled. "And Thomas?" "Thank you for trusting us with her." The shopkeeper's weathered face softened slightly. "You've earned it. You and yours. The way you stood up to Pemberton, the whole village heard about it, made folks think differently about what's happening up at the castle." Within a month, 12 village girls were attending lessons at Greymoor, learning to read, write, do arithmetic, think for themselves. Their mothers sometimes lingered after dropping them off, asking quiet questions about their own lives, their own choices. Change rippled outward in ways Elena had never imagined. One evening, as she stood in the great hall watching Sarah Crawford teach a mixed group of women and girls basic healing skills, Darien came up behind her. "You're building something extraordinary," he said quietly. "We're building it," Elena corrected, leaning back against his chest. "Every person here is part of it." "No." He turned her gently to face him. "Elena, this is yours. Your vision, your courage. I gave you a place to do it, but everything else, The sanctuary, the school, the community, the change rippling through this entire region. That's all you. She wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. Pride, yes, but also something deeper. Recognition of what she'd become. Sometimes I can't believe this is my life, she admitted. 3 years ago, I was terrified every single day. Now I'm changing the world, Darian finished, one woman at a time. In the autumn of their 5th year at Graymore, Elena discovered she was pregnant. The realization came slowly. Missed monthly courses, unusual fatigue, a persistent queasiness in the mornings. Sarah Crawford confirmed it with a knowing smile and practical advice about what to expect in the coming months. The news filled Elena with equal parts joy and terror. She told Darian that evening in their private chambers, her hands trembling as the words came out. "I'm pregnant." He went very still, his expression unreadable. Then slowly, his face transformed, surprise giving way to wonder, giving way to a joy so pure it made Elena's throat tight. "A child," he whispered. "We're going to have a child." "Are you happy?" Elena asked, needing to hear it. "Happy?" Darian pulled her close, his laugh rough with emotion. "Elena, I don't have words. A child. Our child. But what if I'm not ready?" The fear she'd been holding back spilled out. "What if I can't? What if I'm a terrible mother? What if I mess everything up?" "You won't." Darian's certainty was absolute. "You'll be magnificent. You're already changing the world for dozens of women. You'll change it for our child too. But a child needs a mother who's strong, who knows herself, who'll teach them to be brave and kind and true." He cupped her face gently. "That's exactly who you are." Elena pressed her forehead against his chest, breathing in his warmth, his steadiness, his unwavering faith in her. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "I know, but you've been terrified before. And you've survived everything. You'll survive this too. We both will." He kissed the top of her head. "And our child will grow up knowing they're loved, knowing they're free, knowing they can be whoever they choose to be." Their daughter was born in the spring, a fierce, howling thing with dark hair and storm-gray eyes and lungs that announced her displeasure with the world at full volume. They named her Catherine Margaret Wolfe, honoring both women who'd stood beside Elena when the world tried to crush her. The birth was hard. Elena labored for 18 hours, attended by Sarah Crawford and 3 other women who'd become skilled in midwifery. Catherine held one hand, Darian the other, both of them steady anchors as pain crashed through her in relentless waves. When the baby finally came, slippery and perfect and screaming, Elena held her daughter for the first time and felt something shift in her chest. A fierce, protective love that made everything she'd fought for suddenly sharper, clearer, more vital. This child would grow up free, would never know the cage Elena had escaped, would be taught that her worth wasn't dependent on marriage or status or obedience to anyone except her own moral compass, would be taught to choose herself. "She's perfect," Catherine whispered, tears streaming down her face as she looked at her tiny namesake. "She's ours," Elena said, looking around at the women gathered in the room, not just family by blood, but family by choice, by survival, by the bonds forged in shared struggle. "All of ours." And she was. Little Catherine grew up surrounded by women who'd fought for their freedom and won, who taught her strength and kindness in equal measure, who showed her that love wasn't ownership and marriage wasn't surrender, and a woman's value came from who she was, not who she belonged to. The castle became her playground. She toddled through corridors where women studied and worked and healed. She sat on the kitchen floor while Mrs. Brennan taught cooking, absorbing lessons about self-sufficiency and pride in one's work. She followed Sarah Crawford on village visits, learning that healing meant more than just tending bodies. It meant seeing people, truly seeing them, and treating their dignity as sacred. The village became her classroom. She learned numbers from Thomas the shopkeeper, learned about weather and seasons from the fishermen, learned the names of every plant on the moors from the old women who gathered herbs. And the wild northern landscape became her inheritance. Darian took her riding as soon as she could sit a horse, teaching her to read the land, to respect its dangers, to love its harsh beauty. Elena watched her daughter run fearless through the world she'd built and felt something close to peace settling into her bones. This was what freedom looked like. Not just her own, but generational. A daughter who would never have to fight the battles Elena had fought because those battles had already been won. Or at least, begun. The real test came in their 7th year at Greymore, when little Catherine was 2 years old and the world decided to pay attention to what they'd built. Word reached them in late autumn that Parliament was debating a new law, the Matrimonial Causes Act, which would give women the right to own property independently of their husbands, to divorce in cases of proven abuse or adultery, to have legal standing in court as individuals rather than extensions of their husbands. It was unprecedented, revolutionary, dangerous to the established order, and it was being fiercely opposed by men who believed that changing these laws would destroy the very foundation of English society. "They're holding public hearings," Darian said, reading the letter from their solicitor, Harrison, "collecting testimony from both sides before the final vote. Harrison thinks we should testify." Elena's stomach knotted with familiar dread. In London? Yes. She hadn't been back to London in 7 years. Had built a life so far from that glittering cage she'd almost forgotten it existed. The thought of returning, of facing that world again, made her feel like she was 19 again, trapped and suffocating. "I don't know if I can face them," she admitted quietly. "After everything. After the trial. After what they said about me." "You don't have to," Darian said immediately, setting down the letter to take her hands. "We can send a written statement. Harrison can present our evidence without us being there." "But will that be enough?" "I don't know." Elena looked at her daughter, playing on the floor with wooden blocks, utterly innocent of the battles being fought over her future. "If this law passes," she said slowly, "it will help women the way Greymore has. Maybe more. Women across England will have recourse, protection, options they don't have now." "Yes." "Then I need to speak." The decision crystallized as she said it. They need to hear what happens when women are given freedom. What we've built here. What's possible. "Elena, I'm not the terrified girl who ran from a wedding anymore, Darian." She met his eyes. "I'm the woman who built a sanctuary, who changed lives, who proved that freedom works. If I can't stand up and testify to that, what kind of example am I setting?" Catherine appeared in the doorway, drawn by the serious tone. "What's happening?" Elena explained. "The law, the hearings, the chance to change things for women across England." Catherine's response was immediate and fierce. "Then we'll go. All of us." "All of us?" "Every woman at Greymore who's willing to testify." Catherine's eyes blazed with purpose. "Let them see what we've built. Let them hear 30 voices instead of one. Let them understand that this isn't about one rebellious duchess. It's about hundreds of women who chose freedom and thrived." Margaret stepped into the room, having overheard. "I'll testify," she said quietly, "about what my life was before Greymore and what it is now, about what this law would have meant if it had existed 15 years ago." "I will too," said Anne, one of the first women to find refuge at Greymore, now a confident teacher. "And me," said another woman, and another. By evening's end, 32 women had volunteered to make the journey to London, to stand before Parliament and tell their stories, to fight for a future where no woman would have to endure what they'd endured. Elena looked around at these women, different ages, different backgrounds, united by survival and the fierce determination to make sure others didn't have to suffer as they had, and felt tears burning behind her eyes. "You do this?" she asked. "Risk everything to testify?" "You gave us our lives back," Margaret said simply. "The least we can do is fight for others to have the same chance." They arrived in London 6 weeks later like an invading force that refused to apologize for existing. 32 women from Greymore, plus Darian, Catherine, little Catherine Margaret, and Mrs. Brennan, who'd insisted on coming to make sure you lot don't starve. They took over an entire inn on the outskirts of the city, their presence impossible to ignore. The London papers had gotten wind of their arrival. Reporters lurked outside the inn. Gossip spread through drawing rooms like poison or medicine, depending on who was speaking. The morning of the hearing, Elena dressed with care, not in the elaborate silks of her youth, but in a well-made dress of deep blue wool, elegant but practical, expensive but not ostentatious. The dress of a woman who had nothing to prove and everything to say. Catherine helped her with her hair, pinning it simply. "Nervous?" Catherine asked. "Terrified," Elena admitted. "But I've been terrified before." "And you've survived everything." Catherine squeezed her shoulder. "You'll survive this too." The parliamentary chamber was packed when they arrived. Lords in their formal robes, magistrates with stern faces, journalists with sharpened pencils, curious onlookers who'd heard rumors and wanted to see the spectacle for themselves. And sitting in a reserved section, because of course he would be there, was Elena's father. Lord Edmund Whitford sat with his new wife. He'd remarried 2 years after disowning both daughters. His face carved from ice, his eyes fixed on Elena with an expression that mixed contempt and something that might have been regret. Elena met his gaze steadily. She wasn't 19 anymore, wasn't afraid of his disappointment or his fury. She was free. The lead magistrate called the session to order, his gavel cracking sharply against wood. "We are convened to hear testimony regarding the proposed Matrimonial Causes Act," he announced. "Both proponents and opponents will have the opportunity to speak. We begin with opponents." For the next 3 hours, Elena sat and listened to men explain why women couldn't be trusted with property, with divorce, with legal independence. They argued that women were naturally weak-minded, prone to hysteria, incapable of managing money or making rational decisions. They argued that loosening restrictions on divorce would destroy the family, would lead to moral decay, would undermine the very foundations of English civilization. They argued that a woman's proper place was under her husband's guidance and protection, that this was natural law ordained by tradition and scripture. Elena's hands clenched tighter with each testimony until her nails drew blood from her palms. Finally, the magistrate called for proponents to speak. Harrison stood. "Your Honors, I call the Duchess of Greymore to testify." Elena rose on legs that trembled only slightly. She walked to the witness stand, placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. And then she looked out at the packed chamber, at the lords and magistrates who would decide, at the journalists who would report, at the women in the gallery who'd come to watch history unfold, and began to speak. "My name is Elena Wolfe, Duchess of Greymore," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. 7 years ago, I was Elena Whitford. I was engaged to be married to a man I didn't love, a man I'd later learn was violent and dangerous. When I tried to refuse the marriage, my family moved the wedding forward to trap me. When I fled anyway, they tried to have me declared insane. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. "I was fortunate," Elena continued. "I had help. I had resources. I had a place to go. Most women don't. Most women who try to leave abusive marriages have nothing. No money, no property, no legal rights, no recourse. The law treats them as property of their husbands. And property can't file complaints. Property can't seek divorce. Property can't own itself." She paused, letting the words settle. The proposed law would change that, would give women the right to own property independently, to seek divorce in cases of abuse or adultery, to have legal standing as individuals. Her voice strengthened. "You've been told this will destroy families. I'm here to tell you it will save lives." "Can you provide evidence of that claim?" one of the magistrates asked. "Yes." Elena gestured to the gallery. "In the past 5 years, 32 women have found refuge at Greymore. All of them were fleeing situations of abuse, coercion, or violence. All of them were trapped by laws that gave them no options. If the proposed law had existed when they needed it, many would have been able to seek legal recourse instead of fleeing their homes. Or they could have been women abandoning their duties based on trivial complaints," another magistrate countered. "Is this trivial?" Margaret stood in the gallery, pulling back her sleeve to reveal the scars on her wrist. 15 years of beatings that left me with broken bones, cracked ribs, injuries that could have killed me? Is that trivial? Gasps echoed through the chamber. "Or this?" Another woman stood, showing similar scars. 10 years with a husband who locked me in rooms without food for days as punishment? One by one, the Greymore women stood, showed their scars, physical and otherwise, told their stories in clear, unflinching voices. The chamber fell into shocked silence. Elena looked at the magistrates. "These are not trivial complaints. These are women who survived attempted murder, who endured torture in their own homes, who had no legal recourse because the law saw them as property, not people." "But surely these are extreme cases," a lord protested weakly. "Are they?" Harrison stood, producing a thick folder. We have testimony from 47 additional women documenting similar abuse, physician reports, witness statements, evidence of a pattern so widespread it suggests this isn't extreme. It's common. It's just been hidden because women had no way to speak without destroying themselves. He presented the folder to the magistrates, who began leafing through with expressions ranging from horror to disbelief. Elena took a breath and continued. You've been told that giving women independence will destroy families. But I ask you, what kind of families are you protecting? Ones where women live in fear, where children watch their mothers being beaten and learn that this is normal, that this is what love looks like? She thought of her daughter, playing safely at the inn. The proposed law won't destroy families. It will allow women to escape families that are already destroying them. It will give them the chance to build new lives, lives where they're safe, where they matter, where their children can grow up understanding that marriage should be partnership, not ownership. And you believe you have evidence that such lives are possible? The lead magistrate asked. I don't believe it. I know it. Elena's voice rang with certainty. Because I've seen it. At Greymore, women who arrived broken and terrified have rebuilt themselves into strong, capable, independent people. They work. They learn. They support themselves. They thrive. With your husband's money supporting them, a lord pointed out sharply. Actually, no. Catherine stood, holding a ledger. Greymore's sanctuary is self-sustaining. The women work in our textile workshop, our herb gardens, our teaching programs. They produce goods that we sell. They provide services to the village that generate income. After the initial investment in buildings and supplies, the sanctuary has operated at a profit for 2 years. She presented the ledger as evidence, and the magistrates examined it with obvious surprise. These women aren't charity cases, Elena said. They're skilled, intelligent, capable people who were never given the chance to prove it. Give them freedom, and they flourish. Trap them in marriages with no escape, and they die. If not physically, then in every way that matters. The questioning continued for another hour. The magistrates probed every aspect of Greymore, every detail of the women's stories, every claim about self-sufficiency and success. Elena answered each question with facts, with evidence, with the absolute certainty of someone who'd lived every word she spoke. Finally, the lead magistrate called a break. Elena returned to her seat on shaking legs. Darian pulled her close, whispering, "You were magnificent. I don't know if it was enough. It was everything you could give." During the break, something unexpected happened. Lord Whitford approached their section, his face unreadable. Elena stiffened, but her father stopped a respectful distance away. "Elena," he said quietly. "Father." Silence stretched between them, 7 years of hurt and anger and unspoken words. "What you said in there," Lord Whitford said finally, "about the kind of families the law protects." He paused. "Your mother wrote to me last month about your Aunt Margaret, about what happened to her." "I know." "I didn't know," he said, and for the first time since Elena had known him, her father's voice cracked with something like emotion. "About Pemberton, about Ashford, about any of it. I thought—" He stopped. "I thought I was protecting you, securing your future. I never imagined—" "You never asked," Elena said quietly. "You never once asked me what I wanted, what I needed, whether I was happy or terrified or dying inside." "No." Her father looked old suddenly, the weight of regret aging him. "I didn't. I assumed I knew what was best. I was wrong." He met her eyes. "I won't apologize for everything. I still believe I did what I thought was right. But I was wrong about this. About the law. About giving women no recourse. About treating you like property to be managed instead of a person to be heard." His voice dropped. "You were right to run, and I'm sorry I couldn't see that until now." It wasn't the apology Elena had dreamed of as a girl. It wasn't enough to undo 7 years of pain, but it was something. "Thank you," she said. Lord Whitford nodded once, then returned to his seat. Catherine gripped Elena's hand. "Did that just happen?" "I think it did." When the session resumed, the magistrates called several more witnesses. Physicians who'd treated abused women, solicitors who'd seen wives trapped in impossible situations, even two vicars who argued that true Christian marriage required consent and mutual respect, not ownership and violence. The opposition fought back, of course, but their arguments were beginning to sound hollow in the face of so much evidence, so many voices, so much undeniable truth. Finally, the lead magistrate called for closing statements. Harrison stood. Your Honors, the question before you today is simple. Are women people? Do they deserve the same basic rights as men, the right to own property, to escape violence, to have legal standing as individuals? The evidence presented today shows that when women are given these rights, they don't destroy society. They strengthen it. They contribute. They thrive. The proposed law is not radical. It is merely just. The opposition's closing statement reiterated all their earlier arguments: tradition, natural law, the sanctity of marriage. But something had shifted in the chamber. Elena could feel it. The magistrate announced that voting would take place the following week, after they'd had time to review all the evidence and testimony. The wait was agonizing. The Greymore women stayed in London, unable to leave until they knew the outcome. They spent the days exploring the city. Many of them had never been to London before, and the evenings gathered in the inn's common room, sharing stories and fears and hopes. Elena walked the streets she'd once known so well, seeing them differently now. The grand houses looked like cages. The manicured parks felt suffocating. Even the air seemed stale compared to the wild openness of Greymore. I can't believe I ever thought this was the whole world, she told Darian as they walked along the Thames one evening, little Catherine asleep against her father's shoulder. It was your whole world, Darian said, until you made it bigger. On the day of the vote, they gathered in the parliamentary gallery again, all 32 women holding hands, holding breath, holding hope. The debate raged one final time. Lords stood and thundered about tradition and natural order and the dangers of change. But others, more than Elena had dared hope, spoke about justice, about mercy, about the basic human rights of half the population. Finally, the presiding magistrate called for the vote. Elena's heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. One by one, the votes were cast. The clerk tallied them on a large board visible to the gallery. 47 against 44. 3 votes. The law had passed by 3 votes. The gallery erupted. Women wept, embraced, screamed with joy that 7 years of suppression made explosive. Elena stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, unable to fully comprehend what had just happened. They'd won. They'd actually won, not just for themselves, but for every woman in England, for daughters and granddaughters, and women not yet born who would grow up with rights their mothers never had. Catherine pulled her into a fierce hug, both of them sobbing. We did it, Catherine kept saying. We actually did it. Darian wrapped his arms around both of them. Little Catherine Margaret squeezed between 3 generations of women who would live in progressively freer worlds. Around them, the Greymore women celebrated, crying, laughing, holding each other. Women who'd thought themselves powerless had just helped change the law of the land. Margaret found Elena in the chaos, her face transformed by joy and disbelief. My testimony, what I said about Pemberton, it helped, didn't it? It helped, Elena confirmed. Your courage helped. All of you helped. No, Margaret shook her head. You helped us first. You showed us freedom was possible. We just passed it forward. Son, they returned to Greymore as heroes. The village turned out to welcome them home, not just a polite reception, but a genuine celebration. Men, women, and children lined the road from the coast, cheering and waving banners. Thomas had organized a feast in the town square. You've done us proud, he said, shaking Elena's hand with genuine respect. All of you. Changed the world you did. Sarah Crawford pulled Elena aside, her weathered face bright with tears. My granddaughter will grow up in a different world because of what you did, she said. She'll have choices I never dreamed of, rights I couldn't imagine, freedom I thought was only for men. We did it together, Elena said. All of us. Maybe. Sarah squeezed her hand hard. But you started it. Don't forget that. One woman choosing freedom started all of this. The celebration lasted 3 days, dancing, feasting, stories told and retold until they took on the polish of legend. The Duchess who ran from her wedding, the women who stood up to Parliament, the law that changed everything. Through it all, Elena felt the weight of accomplishment settling into her bones. Not the crushing weight of responsibility, but the satisfying weight of a thing well done. They hadn't just survived. They'd changed the world. The years that followed brought transformation that rippled outward like stones thrown into still water. More women came to Greymore, not just seeking refuge now, but seeking education, opportunity, a different model of living. The sanctuary expanded to meet the need, building new cottages on the estate grounds, hiring more staff from the village, creating workshops that produced goods sold across northern England. The textile workshop became particularly successful, producing high-quality wool goods that commanded premium prices. The women who worked there took pride in their craft, in their self-sufficiency, in the money they earned and controlled themselves. An herb garden expanded into a medicinal business, with Sarah Crawford training a new generation of healers. The teaching program grew to include not just basic literacy, but advanced mathematics, natural sciences, even law for women who wanted to understand their new rights. Within a year, 3 more sanctuaries had opened across England. Within 5 years, there were 15, each one built on the model Elena had pioneered: refuge combined with education, safety combined with self-sufficiency, community built on mutual support rather than hierarchy. The network grew organically, women helping women, each sanctuary learning from the others, adapting to local needs while maintaining the core principle. Women deserve freedom, and freedom requires both safety and opportunity. Elena maintained correspondence with all of them, offering advice, sharing resources, celebrating victories and mourning setbacks. The work was exhausting and endless and absolutely necessary. She would inherit Greymore someday, and she would never know what it meant to be caged, to have her choices stripped away, to believe her only value lay in obedience. "What are you thinking?" Darian asked, joining her on the terrace. Gray touched his temples now, and lines creased his face, but his eyes held the same steady warmth they'd held since that first night in the park when he'd offered her a choice. "That we did it," Elena said softly, leaning into his familiar warmth. "We actually built something that will outlast us." "You built it." "We built it." She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "You gave me the space, the support, the belief that I could. Without you, you would have found another way." Darian's certainty was absolute. "You were always going to change the world, Elena. I just had the privilege of watching." Below, Catherine Margaret was demonstrating some principle of leverage to 3 younger girls, using a board and fulcrum to lift a heavy stone. Her voice carried up to the terrace, confident and clear, teaching the way she'd been taught, with patience and expectation of competence. "She's going to be extraordinary," Elena said. "She already is." Darian smiled. "Wonder where she gets it from." Her father. Her mother. They stood together in comfortable disagreement, watching the life they'd built unfold around them. The castle bustled with activity. Women working, learning, teaching, healing. The village beyond hummed with prosperity. And somewhere across England, women were making choices they couldn't have made a decade ago because the law had finally recognized their humanity. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd stayed?" Darian asked, his voice quiet. "If you'd married Ashford? If you'd never run?" Elena considered the question honestly, no longer afraid of that alternate path. "I'd be dead," she said simply. "Maybe not physically, though possibly that too given what we learned about him, but everything that mattered, the part of me that fought and dreamed and refused to be small, that would have died. Slowly, quietly, but completely." She turned to face him fully. "You saved that part of me. Not by rescuing me, but by believing it existed. By seeing it when I'd almost forgotten it myself." "You saved yourself," Darian corrected gently. "I just gave you a place to do it. Then I'm grateful every day that you were at that ball, that you saw me, that you believed I was worth the fight. You were always worth it." He pulled her close, and she let herself sink into his embrace. "You just needed to believe it too." A commotion below drew their attention. A carriage was arriving, dusty from travel, the horses tired. Elena recognized the crest on the door and felt her stomach tighten. Her mother. "I should go down," Elena said. "Do you want me to come?" "No." She squeezed his hand. "I need to do this alone." "Mother," Elena said. "Elena." Lady Whitford's eyes swept over her daughter, taking in the simple but well-made dress, the capable hands, the confidence that sat differently than it had in a London ballroom. "You look well." "I am well." Silence stretched between them, filled with 7 years of unspoken words. "Why are you here?" Elena asked. Her mother's composure cracked slightly. "Your sister Margaret wrote to me about what you've built here, about the women you've helped, about—" She paused. "About what happened to her, what I failed to see." "Yes, I came to see for myself." Lady Whitford looked around again. "And to tell you that you were right, about everything. I don't expect forgiveness," Lady Whitford continued, her voice tight with emotion she was barely containing. "I don't expect reconciliation, but I wanted you to know what you've done here, what you've built, what you've changed. It matters. It's important. And I was wrong to try to stop you." Elena studied her mother's face, seeing genuine regret beneath the careful control. "Why now?" she asked. "After 7 years?" "Because I've spent those 7 years watching the world change, watching women invoke the new law, watching your sanctuary spread, watching my own youngest sister leave her husband and rebuild her life because of the path you cleared." Her mother's voice cracked. "And I realized that while I was trying to protect you from scandal and ruin, I was actually condemning you to a slow death, just like I was condemned." "Mother, I married your father at 17, Lady Whitford said quietly. "I had no choice, no say in the matter. He's not a cruel man, but I've spent 43 years living a life I didn't choose, being a person I didn't want to be. I thought I was saving you from hardship by securing you a similar life. I didn't understand I was passing on a prison." Tears glistened in her eyes, tears Elena had never seen before. "You broke free," her mother continued. "You chose yourself, and in doing so, you showed me what I'd given up, what I'd made you give up, what I'd almost destroyed." She took a shaking breath. "I'm sorry, Elena, for all of it. You deserved better from me." Elena felt her own tears starting. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." Her mother managed a trembling smile. "I just needed you to know and to ask." She paused. "Your sister Margaret is here, isn't she?" "Yes." "Could I see her? I know I have no right to ask, but—" "She's in the West Wing. I'll take you to her." "Catherine," she whispered, using her sister's given name. "Margaret." Lady Whitford's composure finally shattered completely. "I'm so sorry. I should have known. Should have helped. Should have believed you." Elena left them to their reunion, finding her way back to the terrace where Darian waited. "How did it go?" he asked. She apologized. Actually apologized. Elena shook her head in wonder. "I never thought—" "People can change," Darian said. "Not all of them. Not easily. But they can." "She's staying for a week, wants to learn about what we've built." "And how do you feel about that?" "I feel sorry for her," Elena said honestly. "For all the years she spent living a life she didn't choose. For all the ways she tried to pass that prison on to me without realizing what she was doing." She leaned against Darian. "But I also feel grateful, because her mistakes taught me what not to be, what not to accept, what not to settle for." "That's generous." "It's honest." Elena smiled. "And honesty is freedom too, isn't it? The freedom to see people clearly, including their flaws, and still find compassion." Elena watched her daughter build a life of choice and purpose, and felt the work of her own life validated in the most profound way possible. Lady Whitford visited twice more before she died, each time staying longer, asking more questions, understanding more deeply what her daughters had built and what she'd almost destroyed. She and Margaret reconciled slowly, painfully, but genuinely, and when she passed, peacefully, in her sleep, both daughters mourned her with complicated grief that held both love and regret. Lord Whitford lived to see his granddaughter become a respected solicitor. He never fully apologized, never fully acknowledged his role in Elena's suffering, but he did eventually admit she'd been right. That had to be enough. The sanctuary network continued to grow. By Elena's 50th birthday, there were 37 sanctuaries across England, Scotland, and Wales, each one helping women find freedom, education, and self-sufficiency. The model was being studied in France, Germany, even America. What had started as one woman's desperate flight from a cage had become a movement. And through it all, Greymoor remained the heart of it, the original sanctuary, the proof that freedom worked, the place where broken women became whole. On her 65th birthday, Elena was summoned to London for an unexpected honor. The Crown had established an award for extraordinary service to the welfare of women and children. Elena was selected as the first recipient. She made the journey south with Darian, Catherine Margaret, and 2 of her grandchildren. The London she returned to had changed, not completely, but noticeably. Women walked the streets with more confidence. Female-owned businesses dotted the commercial districts. The laws Elena had helped pass had created ripples that kept spreading. The ceremony was held in the same parliamentary chamber where she'd testified 20 years earlier. But this time, she wasn't defending her right to exist. She was being honored for the life she'd built. The chamber was packed, not just with lords and magistrates, but with women. Women who'd passed through Greymoor. Women who'd used the new laws to escape abuse. Women who'd started businesses, pursued education, chosen their own paths because Elena had proven it was possible. The Prime Minister himself presented the medal, a silver medallion engraved with the words, "For service to freedom." "The Duchess of Greymoor," he said, his voice carrying through the silent chamber, "represents the best of English courage and innovation. She saw injustice and chose to fight it. She saw suffering and chose to end it. She saw women trapped and chose to free them. Her work has changed thousands of lives directly and millions more indirectly. She has made England a more just nation." Elena accepted the medal with hands that shook slightly, looking out at the packed gallery. Her family sat in the front row. Darian, still steady after 40 years together. Catherine Margaret, now a mother and respected solicitor herself. Her grandchildren, who would grow up in the world she'd helped create. Behind them sat hundreds of women, young and old, wealthy and poor, survivors and thrivers, all connected by the thread of freedom Elena had helped weave. When it was her turn to speak, she said simply, "I'm not a hero. I was just a scared girl who got tired of being afraid." Her voice carried clearly, stronger than it had been at 19, steadier than it had been at 25, certain in ways only experience could teach. "Everything I built because someone believed I could. My husband believed when I couldn't. My sister believed when the world said I was insane. The women of Greymoor believed when society said we were all broken." She paused. "And eventually, I believed it too." She looked directly at the young women in the gallery. "The real heroes are every woman who chooses herself when the world demands obedience, who survives when survival seems impossible, who fights for freedom even when the cost is everything." Her voice strengthened with each word. "Those women changed the world. I just showed them it could be done." She held up the medal. "This doesn't belong to me. It belongs to every woman who refused to be small, every woman who broke her cage, every woman who chose courage over comfort, every woman who looked at an impossible situation and said, 'I will survive this.'" She looked at her granddaughter, sitting wide-eyed and attentive. "And it belongs to every girl who will grow up free because we fought for that freedom, who will choose her own path because we cleared it, who will live without cages because we broke them." The gallery erupted in applause that seemed to shake the ancient walls. And Elena felt the journey that had started in a glittering ballroom 46 years ago finally come full circle. She'd been terrified that night, trapped, dying slowly in silk and expectations and the weight of other people's dreams. Now she stood free, honored, surrounded by the evidence of what one person's courage could create. It had cost everything: her family, her name, her security, years of hardship and struggle and doubt. And it had been worth everything. Elena died at 73, in her sleep, in the bed she'd shared with Darian for 48 years. He'd passed 2 years before, peacefully, his hand in hers, whispering that loving her had been the greatest adventure of his life. They buried her on the cliffs overlooking the sea she'd loved, beside the husband who'd seen her when she was invisible. The stone was simple granite, carved with words Catherine Margaret had chosen. Hundreds attended the funeral. Women who'd passed through Greymoor, their daughters and granddaughters. Village families whose lives had been transformed. Magistrates and lawmakers who'd been inspired by her testimony. Reporters who'd covered her story for decades. The sanctuary network sent representatives from all 37 locations, each carrying a banner with their sanctuary's name. They lined the path to the grave like an honor guard of freedom. Catherine Margaret gave the eulogy, her voice strong despite tears that wouldn't stop falling. "My mother taught me that cages are made of lies," she said, looking out at the sea of faces. Lies about who we're supposed to be, what we're allowed to want, how small we're supposed to make ourselves to fit into the world's expectations. She paused, gathering strength. She taught me that breaking those cages is the bravest thing a person can do. Not because it's easy, it's never easy. Not because it's safe, it's never safe. But because it's necessary. Because living in a cage, even a comfortable one, isn't really living at all. She placed a sprig of heather on the grave, the wild flower that grew across Greymoor's moors, hardy and beautiful and impossible to tame. She taught me to be free, and in doing so, she taught thousands of other women the same lesson, that we are worth fighting for, that our choices matter, that our lives are our own. Catherine Margaret looked at her own daughter, standing solemn beside her, and at the granddaughter Elena had never met, born just 3 months ago and named Elena Catherine in honor. Her legacy isn't just the sanctuary she built, or the laws she changed, or the women she helped. It's the belief, passed from mother to daughter, from woman to woman, generation after generation, that we deserve freedom, that we're worth saving, that we can choose ourselves without apology or shame. Her voice grew stronger, carrying across the clifftop. That's the world she gave us, a world where women can choose, can survive, can thrive, can be whole. And we'll keep building on it, one choice at a time, one brave act at a time, one woman at a time, until every cage is broken and every woman knows she's free. The wind blew across the cliffs, carrying the scent of salt and heather and wild, endless possibility. And somewhere in that wind, in the crash of waves against ancient rock, in the cry of seabirds wheeling overhead, Elena's spirit danced. Because she'd done it. She'd chosen herself when the world demanded obedience. She'd survived when survival seemed impossible. She'd built freedom where there had been only cages. And that one woman, choosing to be brave, could change the entire world. Then slowly they began to sing an old song from the village about freedom and wild places and spirits that couldn't be tamed. The song rose and fell with the wind, carried across moors and villages and towns and cities, across all of England and beyond, a testament to one woman's courage and the revolution it had sparked. And in Greymoor Castle, in rooms where women still found refuge and healing and hope, candles were lit in windows, one for every woman who'd found freedom, one for Elena, who'd shown them all it was possible.